Let's start this thing off by sort of giving you a soft introduction. You're a theoretical physicist.
Yeah.
Been doing this your whole life.
Yes.
You were contacted by the CIA in the 70s, is that right? To work on some stuff with consciousness and
flying saucers.
And flying saucers in the 70s.
Yeah. And actually even a little bit before that, but that's, a complex story.
Right. And then your early childhood. Can you explain what was going on in your early childhood when you got that phone call that one night from who called you?
I should go back before that.
Okay.
Because when I was about 7 or 8, I guess, my parents in Brooklyn got divorced, and I went to live with my maternal grandparents in the Bronx. And my grandfather was working for the U.S. Army. And he was like a chauffeur. He would drive out of the Garment District, the Quartermaster Corps, and he would drive these officers around, whatever they were doing, acquisition of material, uniforms in the Garment District. So I would go down there a lot, and it was an interesting situation. In fact, I spent a lot of time there, and they gave me free reign of the place as a kid. The 8-10-year-old kid, I would run around. They had all these great laboratories, and they had cold weather lab and a hot weather lab and this and and stuff. And I was like play there, and then I sometimes would drive around with my grandfather driving the car, sitting in the back of this Army vehicle with these Army officers, like talking. And I was a bright kid. They were like encouraging me to. I had been reading all the science fiction pulp magazines coming out, 25 cents, astounding, amazing stories. And I knew about time travel and rockets to the moon. I wanted to be a rocket engineer and build the rockets. And I was being encouraged by all that to do that. And they also, I remember the subject of flying saucers came up. So this is like maybe just a couple of years, 3, 4, at most 5 years after Roswell. Actually less than that, 3, 4 years after Roswell. And then much later, I guess in the 90s, when the book by Colonel Philip Corso, The Day After Roswell, came out, I opened the book and I looked at the photograph, and I said, I recognize this. I can't be 100% sure because I could be like manufacturing. Remember, you can't tell. This something happened over 70 years ago, right?
Right.
73, 74 years ago, and. But I think it was Corso was the main guy who used to talk to me.
Corso was?
Philip Corso, the guy who wrote, you know who he is? Do you know who
he wrote The Day After Roswell, right?
Yeah, but do you know what it's about? Do you know the story?
I haven't read it, but I've heard about it.
Okay. Well, Corso is the guy who claims that he was at Roswell and that he witnessed the aliens, dead aliens, and that he saw the saucer, and that he had them shipped to Wright-Patterson, I guess it was, back then. And then he also claims that later on, he claims that I forget this general he worked for, he was in charge of the foreign materiel. He was in charge of all the retrieved material, crash material from Roswell. Okay. Mm-hmm. And there's I can tell you a lot more. Maybe later we get into it because otherwise it'll be too disjoint if I just jump ahead to there's more stuff I know about the Roswell material. I know a lot of stuff about that. Okay, so there we are. I'm a few years after Roswell happens. I'm with these guys. I'm with the military officer, I think, or was somebody like him, or somebody worked with him because they were talking about flying saucers. I was being talked to, flying saucers. And then, so then I moved back with my mother when I'm about 13 in Brooklyn, and that's when the phone call happened. I'm alone. And my mother's somewhere out. It's a summer night, it's a nice warm summer night, probably August. And the phone rings, And I pick up the phone and I hear, first, I could hardly hear just like coordinates, like numbers, like 7, 6, but in a strange voice, but very low. And I'm trying to listen. I don't quite, can't get it. And then the volume increases. And I hear also clunking, like switching circuits. Oh, I was reading a book at the time on the early computers, mechanical relay computers called Switching Circuits, Bell Laboratories. So I'm hearing like the clunking. So it's like a computer. Okay, what I thought, what people thought of computers. Well, 1953, hardly anybody even knew what a computer was, but I did. And so and then gets louder, and then Stephen Hawking. You know who Stephen Hawking
Oh, yeah.
is? Okay, well, you know what he sounded like because he couldn't talk? The metallic voice. It's the Stephen Hawking voice in 1953. Okay, I'm hearing this right, and it says and identifies itself as a computer on board a flying saucer from the future. Back from the future. Okay.
Verbatim.
Well, I'm sort of paraphrasing, but I'm paraphrasing. This
Said it was on a flying saucer, though?
Yeah, it says. Well, I think it said it was on board a spacecraft from the future.
Okay.
It may not have said flying, but I was into flying saucers already by then. So it was space. It's a time machine, time travel. Right away, I'm told it's time travel. And they said they are contacting several hundred. I think they said even 400. I think I heard the 400 young receptive minds that they want to teach their technology to. Bear in mind what's happening now, with the congressional, all this stuff, right? They want to teach their technology. And at first I thought, because I was a pretty streetwise kid, and I thought it was, it's a joke. I thought it was a joke because I'm not out of touch with reality. I mean,
How old are you?
I was 13, 1953, 13 years old. And I'm trying to think okay, I got the joke, who's doing this? And then suddenly it occurs to me, none of my friends of my age group were as smart as me in terms of science. They weren't into all this stuff. They were like normal kids. I was an abnormal kid. I was a nerd. But these kids, they're just all American, back, so it couldn't have been a kid. And also, none of them had access to the kind of technology that can make a cold metallic voice, right? And I thought, got to be an adult. This is like going through my mind, and then so that could be dangerous. That was, knew that there may be weirdos around, and but then it said, so I let it continue, and it said I had to now tell them out of my own free will if I wanted to participate in this project. And then, did you ever see this thing with the, like you have the little devil on one shoulder and the angel on the other shoulder and say, do it, don't do it. And I'm thinking to myself, no. I think, internal dialogue, no. But then I feel like an electric shock go from the base of my spine to the back of my head here. It's like an electrical feeling. And I hear myself saying yes. All right, this is interesting. And then they say, and they also said that I begin. They said good, and now they said I will begin to meet the others in 20 years. So it's got to be time travel. They're telling me what's going to happen 20 years in the future, 73, right? So, and then they said, then the voice says, go out on your fire escape, and we're going to send a ship to pick you up in 10 minutes. All right. So at this point, so I hang up the phone, and at this point, I'm scared and I'm excited, right? The kid, And so I run down into the street. It's a hot summer night. This is New York. This is Flatbush. This is it's an Irish, German, Italian, Catholic neighborhood. The big church, the Irish bar, the Italian baker, the German bakery where I got these Charlotte Russes and everything, and it's brownstone, and it's everybody's out. It's a warm, beautiful night. Everybody's out on the street, the mothers with their kids and the strollers. It's a whole scene out of like a Broadway musical, right? And I had a gang. I was like my gang. I'm looking. So I find Neil and Norman Legata. Okay, Neil is my age, 13, and he's a strapping Italian kid. I mean, he's a strong kid. Mm-hmm. And his little brother, Norman is his brother, who's like 10 years old, the two of them. So they're part of my, and then I run into my Winky, who is a tough Irish kid. And our mothers, we grew up together, and all the mothers knew each other. And Winky, he's like a prize fighter. He's a really tough Irish kid. Like he'd say, punch me in the stomach. He had the abs. Punch me. And he when I went to Cornell at age 16, he joined the Marines. Okay, he was in the Marines. He was in Vietnam again. Well, no, this is before Vietnam. No, Korea. Wait a second. No, this is before Vietnam. This is 56. Yeah.
Okay.
This is right after Korea. So, and he then when he got out of the Marines, his real name is Al Bro, and he became a very well-known New York City NYPD homicide detective. Okay, I don't know if he's still alive. Amen. All right. So so we all said, the flying saucer's coming to get me, coming to pick me up. And, so the four of us kids, we go up to my place within the 10-minute period, and that's it. Nothing ever happened.
Nobody showed up.
No, they didn't show up, as far as I know. All right.
So did you think about that after? Did you think like,
not really, yeah,
maybe was I being
really.
pranked?
And I forgot, basically forgot about it, right? Forgot about it. And then what happens? But then, remember, I was with all this Army stuff happening before I got back to Brooklyn, right? So then I'm going to high school, and I get involved with this kid, Johnny Glogauer, who's a year younger than me. And he's a quiz kid. At that time, they had a radio show, The Quiz Kids. And he also went to Juilliard. Do you know anything about Juilliard School of Music? Is for very talented kids in music in Manhattan. So he was a student of violin at Juilliard. He was a quiz kid on the radio. He's kind of famous. And he was also reading St. and Shield tensor calculus. He's 12 years old, which is, the mathematics of Einstein's general theory of relativity. Mm. Okay. And he, in fact, they took him, the Quiz Kids show, there's a whole big thing in the newspapers, that they take this boy genius, like a Mozart of, and he was also Juilliard. He was famous, he was a celebrity, basically. And they took him to meet Albert Einstein. This is 1953. Einstein died like 2 years in 55. And so I'm the only kid that Johnny can talk to. And so during our middle school, basically I would spend a lot of time, me and Johnny, hanging out, talking science, all that stuff. He would be sort of teaching me tensor calculus, kind of, right? And then there's this other kid whose name I forget, whose father was the physics professor at Brooklyn College, which is right next door. Right, that's my neighborhood. We're very close to Brooklyn College and Midwood High School, where Woody Allen went. And so we would also spend. By this time, I was already in high school, like a freshman. I skipped a year. I guess it was sophomore. They skipped us through, so we would also be hanging out. Johnny Glogauer, this other kid, I wish I could remember his name, but his father was the professor of physics at Brooklyn College. So we'd hang out in the physics laboratory at Brooklyn College, playing around, doing whatever we were doing. And then there's this other crazy kid named Robert Bashlow. Robert Bashlow was about my age, Russian Jewish. And he was also at Juilliard piano, and he also was making thousands of dollars at the age of 13 in the coin market in New York, Manhattan, selling rare coins. She always had money. We had whatever money we want. You want this ice cream, you want that, you want, and he could play anything. We would hang out in his parents' in his basement. They had a Steinway piano. He'd be playing Mozart, Scarlatti, Bach, flawlessly, like a concert pianist.
Wow.
Okay. So one day he says, hey, listen, you got to meet this guy. So Johnny Glogauer, me, and Robert Bashel takes us up to Germantown, 86th Street in Lexington area. Germantown is, this beautiful apartment house. And we meet this guy who's about 30 years old named Walter Breen. Okay, Walter Breen, young guy. And Walter Breen, so we start hanging out a lot, going up, weekends. Walter Breen. Now, it turns out Walter Breen... Now, this is interesting. Walter Breen is running a program for gifted children run out of Columbia University by Professor William Sheldon. Gifted studying, so he's gathered there. So Breen's apartment is a beautiful apartment. Actually, it was a mess because they didn't clean. But he had sculptures and books. It was, he was a real intellectual place, and people would come from Ayn Rand, from all kinds of people would show up there. It was kind of like an enriched atmosphere, and they would talk. It was like a salon. Mm. And we were part of that scene. And then, but at times these guys in black suits, like the men in black, would come up from Albuquerque, from New Mexico, and they would lecture us. This was McCarthy era. This is Eisenhower's president, and they would lecture us on the Russian threat, the Soviet threat, communism, and how it's important we learn physics. And they were talking about flying saucers. We want you to figure it out, okay? And then also they would test us for psychic powers. They would do run the different tests to see if we could move objects with our minds. So right out of X-Men. And Walter didn't do too much of it, but he was Walter was like the scoutmaster, okay, for these. And then so this was going on. My whole high school. Also, I was in the Civil Air Patrol. Air Force cadet, sort of flying airplanes, Griffiths Air Force Base, Civil Air Patrol for kids, and then, so when it came time to go to college, Walter, they wanted me to go to the University of Chicago. They had some connections there. They had this 100-book program.
Who wanted you to go there?
Breen, the people from Columbia, from this school, this X-Men kind of thing, where they were.
Did they have a name for that program?
Well, no. There's a guy, you may want to talk to him. There's a guy named Bruce Vogel. He's a little bit younger than me. He was part of that program. Later, I think, after I had already left it, he was part of it. But he has all of the Walter Breen manuscripts. So he knows a lot about it. And if you wanted to actually do some investigations, probably I'll give you his phone number. You can call him. And so...
and then, sorry, just going back to when you were hanging out with Walter and those guys, those quote-unquote men in black were showing up.
Yeah.
When you talked to those guys who showed up from Albuquerque, did you ask them who they were, where they were from?
Remember, we were kids. We don't, we're innocent kids. We don't know what the... Well, no, they
told you that? They said...
No. Well, you could see they were like official, like FBI guys. So, they were in... they were both... the way the FBI dresses, they were dressed like that.
Okay.
And I remember we walk around, we go out to eat with them, and I remember one guy, Walter is with some other kids in the front, and I'm just talking to this one guy, and he's talking to me about patriotism and defending the country and all this kind of pep talk, anti-communist kind of pep talk.
Right.
And I did remember one time they're saying like a critique, they're saying, I heard one of the guys say, hey, Walter, why can't you get these kids more into the arts? Because there was stuff about sculptures and music, and some of them were. Mm-hmm. And Walter was saying, well, no, they only want to do science, math. Okay, so there was, Alan Greenspan was part of the group. not my group. He's in an earlier version. Alan Greenspan became head of the Federal Reserve. Okay?
Wow.
Other guys, Robert Salome, a lot of people, they were like obviously creating cadres like for the ruling class, for the intelligence community to sort of like take over as part of the, this is some kind of project. And I think they were from Sandia, but I don't know if it was called Sandia, which is the nuclear weapons lab, okay, from the Manhattan Project, okay. I don't know if at that early, if it was actually called Sandia, but whatever was left from Manhattan Project, that's what they were, these guys I think were connected with. Okay?
Got it.
All right. And, okay, so it comes time for me to go to college. I'm 16, almost 17, my senior year at Midwood. And they wanted me to go to Chicago because they had some program at Chicago. But I also applied, my mother didn't want me to go that far. I also applied to MIT and Cornell. And I got into all three. But my mother said, Cornell's closer to New York, 240 miles. And also there was a beautiful girl, Nellie Gottlieb, who was going to Cornell, high school kid, and who said, Jack, why don't you come to Cornell? I was kind of in love with, smitten with her. She was quite lovely. And so I decided to go to Cornell. And they were kind of unhappy. Walter's group, they were really disappointed they didn't go to Chicago. So they had some reason they wanted me to go to Chicago. I don't know. I'll never know what it is. Well, Bruce Vogel may know what it was. So in any case, time for me to go to Cornell. Oh, yes. And Walter said he had written a 10-page analysis of me, for my colleges, college entrance. They arranged for me to go to these schools, okay? And he did say, in the 10-page thing, I did say, well, you're young and you're emotionally immature, but you could be another Isaac Newton creating an entire new physics. That's what I was told, okay? I'd like to actually see that report. In fact, this guy, Bruce Vogel, is trying to see if there's anything in Walter's writings where he talks about that period, because right. And so, okay, but there's another strange thing about this guy, Walter Breen. He was in the Army Air Force in New Mexico in 1947. Around Roswell.
Right.
Okay. And in 1947, he was in a plane crash. Now, was it a plane crash because of the flying saucer? He never said that.
Okay.
But he was in a plane crash, and he was hurt, and he was in the Army hospital for many months, almost a year maybe.
Wow.
Okay. But he said, as a result, after the plane crash, he suddenly got superpower, intellect. Seems to connect with the crash, which suggests that it was connected with the flying saucer incident, right? And he said that, and in fact, you could talk to Bruce Vogel, knows a lot more about this. And he said and then he was able, I guess they had a correspondence course for if you're in the military. He did 4 years of college undergraduate work from Johns Hopkins University in 1 year and got a bachelor's degree at the end of 1 year for 4 years of work because he could do, his IQ was like unmeasurable.
Wow.
Okay.
Okay.
And apparently all the kids that they selected, had to be, a certain level. Okay. So there's a flying saucer connection right then and there with this guy who sends me. Okay. All right. So I go to Cornell, and my professors are the guys who built the atomic bomb. If you go to see the film Oppenheimer, this is Hans Bethe, Philip Morrison, Kenneth Greisen, all these, a lot of these guys are in the movie, I'm told. I haven't seen the movie yet. I'm going to see it in London in about a month when I go back to London. And there we are. So I'm with the guys who built the bomb.
This episode of the podcast is brought to you by Mudwater. Mudwater is a coffee alternative containing 4 adaptogenic mushrooms. With only a fraction of the caffeine as a cup of coffee, you get energy without the jitters or the crash of coffee. And each ingredient was added for a purpose. cacao and chai for a hint of caffeine and hot chocolate-like flavor, lion's mane to support focus, cordyceps to help support physical performance, and both chaga and reishi to support your immune system. What I really love about mud water is that it tastes great, and they took their time to find all the perfect ingredients to develop a product that helps you feel better every single day. Mudwater donates monthly to psychedelic research and treatments as they believe the country is in a mental health epidemic and sees psychedelics as useful tools for individuals with depression, PTSD, anxiety, and other mental health experiences. So get 15% off and a free frother by using my link below, mudwater.com/Danny, and use the code Danny at checkout to get 15% off. That's mudwtr.com/Danny and use the promo code Danny at checkout to get 15% off. It's linked below. Now back to the show.
I was also a singer. I was involved in, I had a musical side to me too. Okay. And in high school, I was in the all-city chorus. Like, for example, we would sing at Madison Square Garden with Arturo Toscanini conducting, 1,000 kids from all the high schools, And then, so when I got to Cornell, I got into, not my freshman year, my sophomore year, I got involved with the Cornell Gilbert and Sullivan Society, Savoyard Society. And I had a voice teacher from England, Keith Faulkner. And so I remember he used to, I would go, to his studio and maybe give me voice lessons, stuff like that. So one day I'm there, and there's this libretto on the piano there, and his close friend was Benjamin Britten, a famous English composer. And Benjamin Britten, this is like 1957 or so, maybe 58, I guess 57, around there. And Benjamin Britten had just written this children's opera, Noah's Flood, about Noah's flood, And so I was in the, Keith produced it. I was in the American premiere of the Noah's Flood opera. I was Ham, as a kid, Ham, the son of Noah. It was the American premiere of this opera,
right,
by Benjamin Britten. But what's also interesting about this is that years later, when Faulkner left Cornell, he went back to England. He was made head of Her Majesty's Royal College of Music in London. Okay, but I only found out fairly recently, last few years, I checked on Wikipedia. Faulkner, he died. Turns out, during World War II, he was the first Royal Navy combat pilot off the carriers. And he was an ace. He shot down a lot of, in the Battle of Britain, he was shot down a lot of, Messerschmitts, So he was a hero, World War II hero. Okay. So all these guys, now it turns out all right, so let me jump. Why am I talking about this? There's a movie called The Good Shepherd.
Yeah, you told me about this last night.
Okay, all right. So the movie, and I told, but for the audience, the point is that, back then especially, Rhodes Scholars, very tight connection between the British intelligence establishment and the American intelligence establishment and the Ivy League schools. The Ivy League schools, white privilege, very elite. Like when I got to Cornell, we were met by, at Frosh Camp that night, by Governor Averell Harriman, who was the governor of New York, who had been the ambassador to the Soviet Union. And we were given a pep talk how we're the future leaders of the country, freedom, responsibility, all this kind of stuff, okay? The origin of Central Intelligence Agency, very interesting. Mm-hmm. In the film The Good Shepherd, which is about James Jesus Angleton,
right,
whose grandson is a friend of mine who I work with, James Angleton III, all right, who's in Florida, in your place, okay? So in any case, in the movie, which has Matt Damon, and I think De Niro's in it. De Niro plays some spook, the CIA spook, okay? And the opening scene of this movie is at Yale. It's a Gilbert and Sullivan production at Yale. Remember, I was the lead tenor of the Cornell Gilbert and Sullivan Society, which is directed from England, from the D'Oyly Carte from England. See, it has English, and the D'Oyly Carte, those people are connected with the British intelligence establishment, well known. If you go look at all this stuff. In fact, the Central Intelligence Agency was created by MI6, by the British intelligence. There's a whole history of that, back before, at the beginning of World War II.
Right.
The Americans, and very naive, Americans didn't have much of an intelligence. So the CIA.
We had the OSS, right?
Yeah, the OSS. Yeah, there's a whole, I could go into the history of the OSS. And I should also mention, now that I'm mentioning, the project at Columbia University was financed by a guy who was connected with the OSS, Eugene McDermott. Eugene McDermott, who's like these he was, in fact, one of the founders of Texas Instruments, was a close friend of William Sheldon, was funding all this stuff to create, the genius kids for the military-industrial complex, All right.
Wow.
All right. Okay. So it's very tightly connected. So in any case, in the opening of the movie, The Good Shepherd, Matt Damon is dressed in, he's playing Buttercup, female, because it was all male, right? Like the Elizabethan theaters, the men played the women. And they still do that at Bohemian Grove, by the way. And
they do?
Yeah. And, because the men are not, it's a men's only club. They allow women, special occasions, but they put on shows and, But the same, this was, this is this Skull and Bones, the same, it's Skull, it's the same, it's the secret societies, that whole thing.
Right.
All right. And the Illuminati, the whole thing. All right. And so in the movie, after Matt Damon is backstage, one of his English professors, like Keith Faulkner was with me, and basically recruits him into the clandestine services.
Mm-hmm.
So this is how, and they're setting up. The Brits are actually setting up the OSS. And the war starts later, the OSS, and there's a whole story about that, but it's too tangential. So the Brits are setting up the OSS with Wild Bill Donovan. There's a whole story I know about that, and eventually becomes the CIA. And Angleton, is one of the early guys. He was the OSS and creating the Central Intelligence Agency.
James Jesus Angleton.
James Jesus Angleton, yeah, whose grandson, I know.
So when you were at Cornell, you were working with the guys who were a part of the Manhattan Project.
Hans Bethe, Phil Morrison, Kenneth Greisen,
and what was
Robert Wilson, And and the important thing there is that the intelligence agencies were there watching everything, right? So, because, for example, one of my close friends in Gilbert and Sullivan was Ronnie Piles, whose father was Rudolf Piles, who I think may be in the movie there, one of the top, I guess, a German Jewish physicist who escaped from Hitler and was in England, then was part of the Manhattan Project. But Ronnie's older than me. So in the early 1940s, he was like 8, 9 years old. And his roommate in his father's house was Klaus Fuchs. Klaus Fuchs was an assistant, brilliant English, also German, I guess, was the assistant to his father, Sir Rudolf Piles, later became Rudolf Piles. And so it was Klaus Fuchs who allegedly gave the secret of the atomic bomb through the Rosenbergs to Joseph Stalin. Okay? So, of course, and Ronnie's in the Gilbert and Sullivan Society with me. He's in the chorus. I'm like a lead, and we were very close friends. So, and he was actually living at Hans Bethe's house. Hans Bethe's a key character in the movie Oppenheimer. So, of course, and plus, this was all the time in the middle of the thing whether Oppenheimer was going to lose his security clearance. This is all happening around me. All my professors, they were very upset, because they didn't like Edward Teller. And these are all guys who are very close to Oppenheimer. And like Phil Morrison, one of my undergraduate advisors, he was under investigation by Joseph McCarthy, the House Un-American Activities Committee, for being a communist agent, being a Soviet agent. So, of course, Cornell was infiltrated by CIA and by the Brits and everything. It was all in the middle of this whole kind of Cold War thing going on right around me. Mm-hmm. And we were, with the guys building the atomic bomb. So, of course, the intelligence agencies are going to be keeping close watch on everything that's going on at Cornell in that period. Obviously, they were. I don't know if they do it today. Today, they're not as smart as they used to be back then.
And then how long did it take after you started going to Cornell and working with these guys that were involved in the Manhattan Project? How long did it take for the CIA to contact you directly?
Well, overtly, no. They never did back then. I was, I was still a kid. Man, I was 18, 19, 20 years old. And and then, let's see. So then what happened? So, okay, so I kind of had a tempestuous... I went to Brandeis.
What's Brandeis?
Brandeis at that time, this is after graduating Cornell, graduate school. I could have gone to Stanford. Leonard Schiff, the head of the physics department at Stanford, actually called me up in Ithaca, through Hans Bethe, and invited me to go to Stanford. But I was married at the time. I was married to the president of the Gilbert and Sullivan Society, and we didn't feel like want to go that far. And I got what's called a Title IV National Defense Fellowship to go to Brandeis. Brandeis was a brand new campus created by the rich Jewish money, but closely connected with Harvard and Boston University and MIT, Waltham, Massachusetts. And it was a brand new campus, and I got a big a lot of money to actually go there. So, and also my wife was given a fellowship to go there. So we went to Brandeis. And, but it was really part of the, we'd go to classes, I go to lectures at Harvard and MIT. It was everything was kind of like connected. It's like, I guess, like Caltech and UCLA and
right,
the Claremont colleges, stuff like that. It was all, fairly close network. And then what happened? So then oh yes, all right. Well, now we're going to get into some of the physics. Now, this is important because last year, guys who I know, Alan Aspey and John Clauser, and also Anton Zellinger, who I don't know, a guy from Austria, got the Nobel Prize in Physics for quantum entanglement.
Okay.
All right. So now we'll go back the summer of 1958, back at Cornell. It's the summertime, and I don't want to go back to New York. It's summer, and I'm offered a job being the night operator of the Cornell 1 billion electron volt synchrotron at the Newman Laboratory of Nuclear Studies up at Cornell to operate the thing at night. They get paid. And so I take that job, and there's not much to do at night, and it's comfortable. There's a big console, and they have actually a shower, and there's like a cot I can rest, just have to be there, like the night watchman sort of thing, But I'm reading this book. It gave me time. This book called Quantum Theory by David Bohm, who had worked with Einstein at Princeton. Bohm had been at Berkeley with Oppenheimer in the 30s, along with Philip Morrison, another of my Cornell professors. Okay, and because Bohm was considered to be at the time the heir to Albert Einstein. He was considered to be very bright, okay? And he was at Princeton working with Einstein, right? And when he was there, he was a young assistant professor. There's a lot of political stuff but I'll just skip over that because he was involved with the Oppenheimer, the communists and stuff, and McCarthy wanted to investigate him. And so there was a lot of political turmoil going on there. This is around 1950, 51. And Bohm was teaching the course in quantum theory based on what's called the Niels Bohr Copenhagen interpretation, which is kind of that was like the main, that was the thing that Oppenheimer had gone to, learn with Bohr and stuff like that. And so I was reading the book. The book I was reading in 1958 now, the summer of 58, this book was from David Bohm's lecture notes when he taught at Princeton. And it was the traditional, but beautifully written book. Bohm was not a good lecturer. He was kind of very shy, but he was a really good, clear writer, good writer. And, So anyway, I'm reading the book, and in the book there were two chapters that stuck out to me. One was a chapter in which the quantum waves, so-called these quantum waves, quantum wave function, is likened to the mind wave, like the mind. As if the mind was a field, was a physical field, it'd be a quantum wave. That's the idea. And this is an idea which Niels Bohr first had at the beginning of the 20th century when he was creating quantum theory, because Niels Bohr, I think his father was a psychologist and he was involved with all these philosophers of mental stuff and consciousness, all that stuff. So the connection of quantum waves to the mind and conscious processes was already part of the very beginning of quantum theory. And David Bohm, in his textbook, Quantum Theory, it's a Dover publication, points out this whole chapter on he calls it the analogy between quantum phenomena and mental processes in the brain.
Can you give me, for myself and for people listening, can you give me a very sort of general idea of what quantum theory is, like for the layman to understand?
Okay, basically it's this. Okay, I'm going to use David Bohm's analogy.
Okay.
Mind, matter, right? Mind, matter. Distinct duality between mind and matter. According to Bohm and Niels Bohr, in a very rough, I'm being very rough now, very rough sense, the mind is this quantum wave function. You hear now about quantum computers? Okay, quantum computers.
Yeah, they operate on atoms, right?
Yeah, or they could, or even yes, yeah, or electrons, small. That's yes, but it's like a wave thing. It's an information field. It's like a wave as opposed to a particle. Okay, it's a wave that has very strange properties. Okay, and in the book, in the Bohm book, he points out certain properties of our consciousness correspond to these quantum wave, these weird, spooky properties of these quantum waves. They're like pure information. So the point is, basically, we just make the intuitive guess. The mind is a physical field, like the electromagnetic field. Our minds and our brain, it's a physical field, but it's a quantum wave.
Okay.
It's a quantum wave. Which is kind of pure. Let's put it this way: it's in the universe itself is split into matter and mind. Where the mind, all the quantum properties of the universe are the intrinsically mental properties of reality. Okay. Right now, Jacques Sarfatti is a quantum wave, and Danny is a quantum wave. Stephen's a quantum wave. We are quantum waves, but they're what are called giant quantum waves. It's kind of like superconductors and superfluid. What we are we are room temperature superconductors, organic molecular superconductors, and what's talking to you now? I'm a waveform. I'm like this, but this giant waveform. That's my mind. That's my mind, which is interacting with the electrons and the molecules and the atoms of the brain. This is a two-way street. Okay, so actually, it's called a further condensate, but that's another thing. We know exactly. Okay, let me just jump ahead. This is very nonlinear, but we'll go as it comes. In 1975, late 75, up on the top of Nob Hill here, where we had this facility that Lawrence Rockefeller was funding us, okay, from the Rockefeller brothers. I'm with this guy named, with this guy George Koopman, young guy, older than me. Well, no, about my age, I guess. Maybe a little younger. In any case, he's like an army spook, CIA spook. He comes from a wealthy family in Connecticut. He's connected with the New York Times, the Sulzbergers. He's like a cousin of Sulzbergers, and he's also running. He ran a defense contractor called Inns Group down in Irvine, California. Is it Inns Group? Yeah, Inns Group. And they had Army contracts, Army Tank Command, U.S. Air Force, and he's funding us. He's one of our funders. This is how the Hippies Saved Physics. David Hippies Saved Physics.
Right.
Okay. David Kai, MIT professor, wrote a book about this whole period. And I'm up there with this guy, Saul Paul Sirag, when this right across from the Grace Cathedral, the Episcopal Cathedral. And George says, Jack, the CIA was formed because of the flying saucer Roswell crash. That's what he said. Okay? That one of the reasons the CIA was formed from the OSS, because they considered it a threat. And I know this is true because I know from James Jesus Angleton's grandson that James Jesus Angleton from the OSS, one of the early pioneers of the CIA, was very scared of the flying saucer phenomenon. And he had all the stuff. I could tell you the whole story about that.
What evidence do you have? Is there that he was actually aware of the UFO phenomenon?
Well, from his grandson. I'm told that by his grandson.
He just told you that, or did he actually have like notes and documents that he?
Well, that's a whole other story. It turns out all the nuts were done, but that's a whole story. That when his when James Jesus there were 3 generations of CIA here.
Right.
There's James Jesus Angleton's the grandfather, and there's a whole sort of side story which I won't go into now. And then his son, my friend's father, the second, Angleton the second, and all 3 of them, James Jesus got them into the CIA. So there's 3 generations of CIA guys, Angleton, related to Angleton.
Mm-hmm.
This is my understanding. When James Jesus Angleton died, all the Angleton papers went to the son, including all the UFO file. Okay? And then when my friend's father died, my friend, these papers were locked in one of those storage units in Miami, storage units.
He's allowed to just have them?
Well, I don't know. Who knows? Maybe he wasn't allowed, but he had them. Trump had them too, right?
Yeah.
No, I don't know what the classification, whether he had them legally or not legally, but he had them. Okay,
yeah, right.
At least so. It's my understanding. I don't know firsthand. I only know secondhand from the grandson. All right, the story told to me.
Okay.
So then, when my friend Jim goes to the storage unit to get the papers, because he's telling apparently the feds they said the federal agents came in and they took everything. It was empty. But right after his father died. His father was they were all, now he's retired from who knows if they're retired, but, okay?
Right.
So, and he only had a few things that, But this is how I met the grandson because of the flying, because I'm into flying. So that's how we all connected. That's the common connection.
Right.
All right.
Right.
So I believe this. So, and it also fits in with what Koopman said. Jack, the CIA was formed because of Roswell, and there are 2 things the CIA wants to know, and also the Defense Department. 1, how does consciousness work? And this is all in that book.
How the Hippies Saved Physics.
Yeah. MIT professor. Harvard PhD. He's a big full professor in charge of the science technology stuff at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. Go talk to him. Mm-hmm. David Kaiser. He was here, sitting here just like you. And
how old is he now?
What?
How old is David Kaiser?
Oh, I don't know. He's in his 40s. He's older than you. Maybe he's 50 now.
Oh, okay.
Because this was like 10 years. Yeah, he's probably late 40s,
okay.
early 50s. He had young children.
Okay.
And you should go, you should definitely interview him. And so they say, we want to know, how does consciousness work? And that's the whole big story. That's what the book's about. There's videos about that. Oh, by the way, there's also a Nova. I'm in Nova on how they say there's a Nova thing, PBS Nova, and the bastard, they show my picture twice, but they don't mention my name. Screw that. I'm not getting, well, I'm kidding, but they should. Yeah, they don't mention my name, but I'm there. You said my image is there, but without not being identified, twice, and so George is saying it's around Christmas time, '75, and Saul Paul Sarag was there. I thought Fred Wolf was there, but he wasn't there apparently. But you could, this guy Saul Paul Sarag is still alive. You should actually interview him. He knows a lot. And George says, CIA was created because of flying saucers, and there's all this weird stuff connected because they have telepathic communication, all that stuff, right? And so CIA wants to know, how does consciousness work? Physics, the physics of consciousness, right? How does it work? That's why Rockefeller is paying for us, and so is this guy named Werner Erhard and these guys from Stanford, and how do the flying saucers work? So those are the 2 things. I was basically pulled out of academia to work on this. which I've been doing for 50, 60 years. Okay?
Wow.
This is what they want to know. And now now it all makes sense because of what's happening. Do you understand? Now this is real. There's no question. This is real. The skeptics are, you should have me on maybe sometime with skeptics and, let's have a debate on all this stuff. What's real? There's a reality war going on.
So how old are you when they pulled you out of the university?
Well, a little bit early. Actually, before that, I was like 1970, 1969, 1970, early 71.
69, 71. They pulled you out of what university?
Okay, well, wait. Okay, well, I have to. Okay, these are a lot of flashbacks, right? We're doing flashbacks. Let's go back a little bit. I have to. I was at Brandeis. Okay. Oh yes, and I had told you I was reading the book on quantum entanglement. Okay, which they got the Nobel Prize for in 2022. Nobel Prize for all this stuff I was reading back in 1958. Mm-hmm. Okay. But hardly anybody knew it. People at Cornell did not know really about entanglement. They didn't even know. I would start talking Einstein, Podolsky, Rosen. Even Hans Bethe really wasn't into it. These guys, it was considered some kind of fringe thing. It wasn't mainstream at all. So I was just, because David Bohm was considered a little bit eccentric too. And even Einstein boy, even though Einstein was so great, he was considered a little bit, Einstein, he doesn't believe in quantum mechanics. There was all this stuff going on. So I was like carrying the torch already at 1958. I'm 19 years old, about API, quantum entanglement. This is really important stuff, man. What's going on? Because it sounded weird, it's spooky, And I could see the connections with consciousness and telepathy and all this weird stuff. Okay, so I get to Cornell. I'm sorry, I get to Brandeis from Cornell. It's like 1961. And I'm in the library and I'm reading a journal called The Reviews of Modern Physics. And there's a paper called The Tau Theta Puzzle by a guy named David Inglis. And he starts talking about EPR, just what was I had read.
What does that stand for?
Einstein-Podolsky-Rosen experiment, 1935, where they predict entanglement. Just back in 1930, it was the Einstein-Podolsky-Rosen paper, entanglement. Okay. They also did another paper where they did about wormholes. See the two things?
Wow.
I don't know if there's this guy, if you heard about ER equals EPR, about the big problem is quantum gravity. How do you relate quantum mechanics to gravity? That's called the quantum gravity problem. That's the big, that's Hawking and Penrose just got a Nobel Prize recently too. All this stuff with, black holes and the evaporation of black holes. That's the frontier of physics today. And I was already there with the entanglement part back in 1958. So I read this paper in 1961 at Brandeis and about the entanglement, about how in high energy physics, these mesons, they split and they connected with each other. And the way the paper's written, it is what a guy named Ray Chow, who's a retired physics professor, semi-retired, who I kind of work with from Berkeley, a Berkeley professor, and he calls it creative tension, what I call creative tension in physics. There are things we don't quite understand. We don't understand how can this quantum entanglement seems to allow faster than light communication. It seems to. It doesn't, okay? That somehow you could be on Mars and I can be on Earth, and if our, say, minds are entangled, that we could instantly, you can sort of know what my mind is thinking and I can know what your mind is thinking. It turns out in ordinary quantum mechanics, there's a fly in that ointment because there's a noise factor, so it can't really happen in standard quantum mechanics. But when you extend quantum mechanics, it can happen. That's a tricky thing. So, but the connection between the mind, consciousness, telepathy, Einstein called entanglement spooky quantum. Einstein called it spooky telepathic action at a distance. When Einstein discovered, Schrodinger actually discovered a little bit before Einstein, but Einstein in 1935 wrote this paper with his students Podolsky and Rosen, the famous what's called EPR paper, that Kaiser's book, that the guys got the Nobel Prize for, basically, what the Bell's theorem, all that stuff. Einstein didn't like it because it seemed to contradict relativity theory, that nothing can go faster than light. You see that if the speed of light of 300,000 meters per second in vacuum, if that's the fastest you can communicate, but yet this entanglement seems to be that there's an influence, faster than light. So what's going on here? The quantum, this creative tension.
Can you explain briefly what the theory of relativity is?
Theory?
General GR. Explain basically.
Okay, there are two theories.
People who may be listening who might not know what that is.
These are not easy things to answer. Okay, the special theory of relativity. Okay, here's what it's about. I'm not going to do the math. What it's about. You're there, I'm here, and there's Steve over there. There's Steve, the technician. Hey, Steve. Now,
he means the camera.
Yeah, but however, we're out in space. We're in our spacesuits. We're all in space. This has to be done in a vacuum. The whole theory of relativity only really works in vacuum. When you're inside matter, there are problems. So, but here's the thing. And we're floating around in our spacesuits, and we have rocket. We can use our rockets, but we can free float. Okay, when we're floating out in space, we are what are called inertial observers, inertial frame. That's very important. We're weightless. There's no gravity. We're weightless, just floating around in space, right? And Steve over there, he's doing something in the space station. We're looking at him. We're watching. We have we're looking through our telescopes, whatever. We're getting light signals from Steve, right?
Okay.
And we're measuring. We're seeing what he's doing. We're sort of measuring. We're measuring his finger, whatever. We're like getting data. I'm getting my data. You're getting your data. Okay. But then we're moving relative to each other. But we're free floating. We're both called inertial observers. But there's a relative velocity between us. Okay, we'll assume that relative velocity between us, there's no acceleration. So we'll assume there's a uniform velocity difference between us. But we're both, with our light, through light signals, we're both measuring what he's doing, what Steve is doing. And by the way, light has a finite speed, right? Mm-hmm. So what I see him doing is coming from his past, right? Because the light has to travel, exactly. Of course, very fast. So
what is the speed of light again?
It's 300,000 meters per second, which is 186,000 miles per second in vacuum. This is only in vacuum now. Got to remember. Okay. So now here's the thing. The first principle of relativity, of special relativity, is suppose. You and I we're what are called inertial observers. That's very important. We're inertial observers. We're free floating in space, our spacesuits. But suppose I want to somehow have a device, I measure the speed of light in vacuum, and I get a number. And you also measure the speed of light in vacuum, and you get a number. But we're moving relative to each other. So normally you would think of cars. Think like the two people in cars move at different speeds, the ground, and you would subtract the velocity to get the relative velocities, what's called the Galilean velocity addition law. That we shouldn't all, if we're both looking at a light signal, and you're moving relative to me, we should see different velocities of light. We should see different light speeds. If you think of light like a car, okay. See if you think if there's a car and you're moving parallel to the car, but at a different speed, and you measure the relative speed of the car to you, and I'm moving at a different relative speed, we're going to get different relative speeds of that car.
Yes, right.
But guess what? When you do light and vacuum, you get the same number.
Interesting. Okay.
That's the special principle of relativity.
Okay.
Now that's what Einstein in 1905 made everybody understand. Actually, there was this guy Lorentz, even before him, and who actually had it, but didn't have quite the right idea. And it turns out that, there are two things in physics at the time. There's what's called classical mechanics, the mechanics, motion, automobiles, stuff like that, rockets, steam engines. Well, that's also thermodynamics. And that's the Newtonian theory of gravity, with the 17th century to 19th century physics of mechanics, the mechanical universe, clockwork, clockwork universe. And then, but then at Maxwell, around the time of the Civil War, well, beginning of the 19th century, early 1800s, you had all these, Sir Humphrey Davy and Michael Faraday and all these guys, Thomas Young, and they were doing electricity and magnetism and light, and all this stuff, optics. Well, Newton already was doing optics, but what happened around the time of the Civil War, James Maxwell, who was a Scottish guy up in, he may have been in London by then, but maybe in Scotland, and he was a mathematician. He took all this stuff before Maxwell, which was before the American Civil War. Physicists, they knew there was electricity, they knew there was magnetism, and they knew there was optics, but they were all three separate branches of physics. Okay,
right.
Okay, they didn't know the connection. But what Maxwell got this great idea that he related the speed of light in vacuum to what's called the magnetic permeability of the vacuum and the electrical permittivity. So Maxwell's able to. This is Maxwell. This is light speed. This is electricity. I call it electric. And this is magnetic. So, okay, I'll get back to that. So this is only one of the things that Maxwell did. So Maxwell this is the first unified field theory. First of all, okay, mechanics had to do with like particles, little hard, massy billiard balls moving around through space and time colliding, right? That's mechanics, basically. They're playing billiards at the bar. Mm-hmm. You're doing Newtonian classical mechanics.
Right, okay.
Okay, conservation momentum, angular momentum, and energy, and all that stuff.
That makes sense.
Okay, all right.
But how does quantum compete with that?
Well, this is pre-quantum. There's no quantum yet. This is all quantum mechanics 100 years later. This is before quantum. Nobody had an inkling about quantum mechanics at this point. What Maxwell did was what are called Maxwell field equations, which unify electricity, magnetism, and light as one unified phenomenon. And the field equations, there are four field equations. One is called Gauss's law. Gauss's law relates the electric charge to the electric field. And then there's what's called Ampere's law. Ampere's law relates the current, the electrical current, to the generation of a magnetic field.
Okay.
And then there's what's called, there's a thing which says that there are no magnetic monopoles. That's sort of technical. And then there's what's called Faraday's induction law, which is how a time-changing magnetic field creates an electric field. Okay. And then, but then Maxwell also did something very important. Going back to Ampere's law, which they knew about, in which a steady current, say, creates like a solenoid, the magnetic field around a coil. He also showed that a changing electric field also generates a magnetic field. This is called the Maxwell displacement current. And when you put all these things together, you get a wave equation where which they predict electromagnetic waves, which is, television, radio, everything, right? This is Marconi, and then later, Edison. Okay. So we predicted electromagnetic waves, Hertz, and that's the beginning of the modern, technological revolution. But the whole point in 1905, you see, the Maxwell's, there was like a contradiction between classical mechanics and Maxwell's electromagnetic field theory, which is sort of analogous to today, where there's like a creative tension between gravity theory and quantum mechanics. So there was, this was a problem.
Got it.
So what Einstein did in 1905, he reconciled. He showed that if you now just realize that in vacuum, the speed of light is invariant, what's called invariant. It's the same number, 300,000 meters per second for you, for Danny, as it is for Jackie. We're out in space, but we're weightless. This only works if you're weightless. Okay, you got to be what I call inertial frames.
Okay.
It works approximately on the Earth because we're, even though we're not really inertial frames, the correction is very small and the speed of light's so big. So, people kind of like a sloppy. They forget about this. Okay. But they make mistakes, which have to do with flying saucers, you see. Okay. But I'm getting ahead of myself. So now, okay. So that's the special theory of relativity.
Got it.
Speed of light's the same for all different people, as long as they're moving uniformly relative to each other, they'll all measure the same speed of light. But as a result of that, certain things happen. It turns out there's something called time dilation. Okay, that if things are so for example, we have what are called cosmic rays, and cosmic rays have what are called mu mesons, certain particles that if you take a mu meson sitting in the laboratory. It takes a certain, it's like radioactivity, a certain half-life, certain amount of time for half of the mu mesons to decay into electrons and I guess neutrinos or something. But these cosmic rays coming in very fast, okay, cosmic rays coming very fast, and you look at, their decay rate is much longer. They live longer.
Interesting.
It's called time dilation. Okay, and this is a result of the fact that the speed of light is the same for all inertial observers. So there's that, and it also led to E equals mc squared. And also, Einstein, that's where he gets the energy is equivalent to mass. There's mass. And that's the atomic bomb, right? Nuclear radioactivity, nuclear physics. So just that one realization that the speed of light is the same for all inertial observers. But now we have to get to general relativity. Okay, general relativity. Oh, and also before I go into, so to summarize, special relativity unifies classical mechanics of Newton, generalizes it so that it's consistent with Maxwell's electrodynamics. Everything is now a consistent picture that the mechanics. He modified, but it's now what's called special relativistic mechanics fits in very nicely with Maxwell's electromagnetic field. Because Maxwell's electromagnetic field equations, turns out, are already demand that the speed of light be the same for you and me if we're moving uniform relative to each other. So Maxwell's theory, but people didn't realize that it was Einstein, and I guess to some extent maybe Lorentz a little bit before Einstein, who realized that in order for Maxwell's theory to make sense, the speed of light cannot be different for two different inertial observers moving relative to each other. All right, but what happens if we're accelerating? What happens if you switch on your rocket engine? You're out in space, and now you're accelerating. Now you'll get a different speed of light from what I get. See, this is the beginning of general relativity. General relativity has to do with several things. It has to do, you can do accelerating frame, what are called non-inertial frames. That's where you're out in space and you fire your rocket and you feel G-force, feeling G-force.
Okay.
See, we're getting now to the UFOs. Remember the UFOs? They're seeing these UFOs. They go off 5,000 Gs. You can't. A human cannot do more than like 8 or 9 Gs for a limited period of time. These are hundreds of Gs, 5,000 Gs.
Right.
Okay. And these guys, even, did you watch the thing, the Senate, the Congressional Intelligence Committee subcommittee?
Yes, I did.
Okay.
Yeah.
Then you see when Commander Fravor, the Navy pilots, but we don't understand the physics.
Yep.
Okay.
I even talked to Ryan Graves on my podcast, and he was
all right. You should try to get now in the future. You should get Ryan to come talk to me together and then I'll explain it to him what he's because they don't understand.
Ryan was only seeing it on his radar. He never actually saw it.
No, but I'm not. It doesn't matter. I'm trying to. So it's he's confused. He doesn't know how it can work. I can explain to him how it works. Simple, elementary. It's elementary physics of general relativity of Einstein. That's all. They don't understand enough physics. So to them, they don't understand it. And the point is, nobody understands it in the military. They don't understand it. Elizondo doesn't understand it. Chris, none of these guys understand it, but they could understand it. They listened to me and a few other. It's very easy to understand. We understand it perfectly. It's elementary, my dear Watson. Okay.
We understand it theoretically, but we don't necessarily know. We don't know if anybody has been able to actually back engineer that.
Well, that's a different story. The back engineering, that's a whole different story.
Right. We don't know if we can actually create that. We know how, theoretically, we know how anti-gravity works, right?
Yeah.
Like Bob Lazar explained this.
Okay. Now, Bob Lazar doesn't explain it. That's a whole other thing. Bob Lazar is not a physicist. Bob Lazar is what's called a useful idiot of the military-industrial complex who's been given a certain amount of information. Actually, that comes from stuff I was working on in the 70s with Abdus Salam some of when he talks about gravity A and gravity B, that's what was called the Salam theory, the F gravity, strong short range gravity, part of the nuclear physics. That part has some truth in it, although he doesn't explain it properly because he's not a physicist, okay?
Let me see if I can regurgitate my layman view of how he explained it. He explained that there was a reactor inside of this sport model UFO saucer, that when the saucer went from horizontal to vertical, it flew belly first. Yeah. And what it did was it sort of displaced matter in front of it so that when the thing moves from left to right, it sort of falls.
Okay, it doesn't. Okay, number one, I don't think that's probably your error. I don't think he said matter. He said it displaces the vacuum, displaces the space itself.
Yes, that's what I meant.
Okay, yeah, not matter. That's different. But yeah, and that's warp drive. That's what I'm talking about. It's warp drive. So he had part of what he says is true, but it's sloppy. It's not done properly. But when he gets to the nuclear, the 115, you don't need any of that. You don't need that 115.
The element 115.
Yeah, it's stupid. It doesn't. And he never explains. Suppose I have a stable isotope of element 115. What's the equations that show me how that affects how does that warp space? Show me how to do that. He doesn't know how to do that because it can't be done. See, it's bullshit. That's what's called pseudophysics. That's a story for idiots, but that's a story he's been given. He's like Benowitz, the Benowitz story. He's been, okay, I can see. I was Lazar. He's like an all-American kid, and he's intelligent. He's a good salesman. He's articulate. Mm-hmm. Okay, he presents himself well, especially back in the 80s. And actually, he was into warp drive before I was. So somebody had told him. I mean, it's only later that I really realized it was warp drive. Only actually last 20 years maybe. So but that's made because see, this is time travel. So I think what's happening is that, and I'm speculating now, is that the stuff that we're going to build, Sarfatti Space Corporation, okay, is going to make that some of that stuff was sent back in time to the 80s, to Area 51, where Lazar comes into the picture. And maybe one of the guys are in the sauce, maybe the time travelers, who go back to Area 51. I'm spinning, this is speculative. I'm not saying this really happened, but it would make sense. This is a possible explanation. And so the guy from the future came back and told Lazar, or told some of the guys there, the scientists there, who then told Lazar, but they watered it down. They gave what's called disinformation. Mm-hmm. What did you call it?
Limited hangout.
Limited hangout. They gave that, yeah. So what
something
it is.
A little bit, a sliver of something that's true.
Yeah.
But not the whole pie.
Yeah, right. And also that may be done deliberately so that straight physicists like me would right away dismiss, this is crazy, which is part of the stigma, the whole stigma, because they don't want the Russians to know, they want the Chinese, whatever, national security, all that kind of crazy stuff, okay? So that could be. So I was actually surprised when I actually first listened to Lazar talk about gravity B, because that's kind of what I'm working on, but he didn't explain it the way I would explain it. So he had a piece of it without really understanding it. And again, as I said yesterday, there are different levels of physics. There's community college, right? Associate degree. There is 4-year college, undergraduate, bachelor degree. There's the master's level and then the PhD level. Lazar is a smart, associate degree level type electrical technician, physics technician. That's what his job was when he was, he's not, and he lied. The problem is he lied about his academic background. He said he went to MIT and Caltech. He didn't.
Right. There's no evidence of it. But there's an argument to the MIT thing. There's an argument that if someone like Los Alamos wanted him to acquire some sort of specific knowledge, they could have sent him to MIT covertly to sort of learn something as part of some dark problem.
That's possible.
Program.
That's possible. But it's clear to me that Lazar doesn't know any math. He doesn't know physics. He doesn't know. He's not a theoretical. See, if he would have write down equations,
right,
and I could tell right away. But he's just given a script. He's reading off a script. He didn't create this. It's not his creation.
Right.
And he's reading off a script that somebody gave him. Now, the people who gave him that script, they may know what I'm talking about. But it wasn't Lazar. We don't know who Lazar spoke to back in Area 51. Okay.
I want to get back to the point when the CIA actually reached out to you and wanted you to work on some of this consciousness stuff.
Yeah, well, that's what I was telling you. That's George Koopman. Well, that's also okay. Wait, I got to go back a little bit.
How did that? Can you walk me through how that works?
Okay, all right.
How do they show up at your doorstep? Do they send you?
Well, sometimes they have many different levels. So first of all,
you're just you're how old at this point?
And then I'm about 35.
You're about 35.
No, but it happened way before then. No, that's already that's a.
I want to know what it's like to be a guy like you in your 30s to be contacted by the CIA and pulled out of academia and start working on stuff like conscious. Like, what is consciousness?
All right, okay.
Telepathic communication.
Let's go back. We have to backtrack a little now. Let's see. Where do I start? Okay. First of all, I'm back. I have to start now where I guess I'm at UCSD La Jolla.
Okay.
This is like the mid-60s. The mid-60s, okay? And I'm a graduate student at the physics department in La Jolla. And I'm part of what's called Keith Bruckner's group. Keith Bruckner, you have to check him out. He's dead now, but there's a thing called the Jasons.
Yes, I've heard of that. The Jason. Yeah, okay. I actually just finished reading Annie Jacobson's book called The Pentagon's Brain, all about the creation of DARPA.
So the guy who was working for UCSD was the head of the Jasons.
Oh, wow.
And at least part of, they would have meetings of the Jasons, and I would go to some of them at UCSD in La Jolla.
They created the first computer, right? And the internet.
No, I think that was before. The first computer is back in the 50s already. That's when my phone calls on the first computer. Back then. That's a Princeton. That's the ENIAC and Maniac, whatever.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Yes, Maniac.
No, I don't think there were no Jasons. That's before. That's right close after Roswell. All right. So
the Jasons are around the time of Vietnam, I think.
Yes. Okay. And this is 60s. I'm there in 65.
Right.
66, 67. And I would go I would sit in on some of the Jason meetings on various things. And Keith Bruckner was chairing it. And also, La Jolla was a beautiful place. Everybody wanted to come to La Jolla. Edward Teller was there a lot. John Archibald Wheeler, Fred Hoyle from England, a lot of people from England. Herbert Froelich, Bert Matthias. It was it was a beautiful place. La Jolla, the beach, and what's it called, the oceanographic, Scripps Oceanographic was part of the campus.
That place is amazing.
Yeah. So in fact, there's a very good book you should read, actually, by the Benford twins, Gregory Benford, one of them called Timescape, science fiction novel. I'm actually in the book. There's a composite of me. I was part of the Benford twins. We were all graduate students together. Okay. And he writes a story. It's all about what's really happening. He writes a story about the future creating the past, communicating with the past. It's in Timescape, because that's part of Fred Hoyle. See, Fred Hoyle. Fred Hoyle used to come there a lot. Mm-hmm. This is Fred. What I'm working on is Fred Hoyle's theory. Fred Hoyle wrote a book, The Intelligent Universe. Fred Hoyle. Let's see now. Dennis Sciama. Fred Hoyle was the Isaac Newton Professor of Astronomy at Cambridge University. Mm-hmm. I think when Fred Hoyle retired, Stephen Hawking took Fred Hoyle's job. But Fred Hoyle used to come all the time to UCSD La Jolla from
Okay.
Cambridge.
Okay.
If you read Fred Hoyle's book, he has everything Jacques Sarfatti talks about also already in Fred Hoyle's book, The Intelligent Conscious Universe, in which the future is influencing the past. Okay? And this is now part of quantum theory, what's called the Yakia Aharonov. There's a whole thing, what's called weak measurement theory. Today, all of quantum entanglement, all the spooky telepathic action at a distance, can be neatly explained, consistent with Einstein's theory of relativity, that there's no signal faster than the speed of light, but things can go backward in time. Everything is now explained. We have a unified conceptual picture connecting relativity, resolving the creative tension between relativity and quantum entanglement, or non-locality, spooky action. We understand it all. It's too much to really explain, but just you have to take my word for it. If you want to do other things later, we can. So we understand that. And that was partly from Fred Hoyle. From Fred Hoyle coming to La Jolla, influencing me and the Benford twins wrote a science fiction novel based on Fred Hoyle's theory. Okay. So everything I'm telling you now, you want to get into it, it's Timescape by Gregory and Jim Benford. It's set in La Jolla in the 70s, and it's very much like it's art imitating reality. Everything that's happening now is kind of like what's in the Timescape book. So read Timescape. That sets the stage. That's what I'm talking about. But it's a fictional story that's more like it's more reality than reality.
Okay.
All right. So where are we at?
So I was trying to get to the point where the CIA actually contacted you and wanted you to work.
Okay. So wait. Okay. So first, okay.
I want you to walk me through that. I know we've gotten kind of veering off topic.
So it's the mid '60s. So I'm involved with Keith Buckner, and it's full of CIA, military. It's the Jasons, right?
The Jasons, yeah.
Yeah. So they're hanging out there too. Harold Urey, did Bruckner? I guess Bruckner was probably part of the Manhattan Project too. Now, come to think of it, he did something. I guess nuclear physicist, nuclear matter. Okay. So and then I was also hanging out, going up to Caltech with meeting Richard Feynman, who I first met Feynman in 1963, and I. So it's the summer of '66. Okay, so I'm invited. I go to a NATO summer school in nonlinear physics at Werner Heisenberg's Max Planck Institute in Munich. I'm a graduate. Summer, and I was also invited. Through beta through all this. I was also invited to Her Majesty's Atomic Energy Research Establishment at Harwell, right near Oxford, out of Oxford. That's like their Lawrence Livermore back. That's the nuclear weapons, nuclear reactors. I was invited there too. At the beginning of the summer, I'm in Munich with Heisenberg. Heisenberg.
Yeah.
Okay. Every day, having tea with cookies and Einstein. Then we even went to the beer halls and had some beer, afterward. Every day, 5 days a week. I'm in Schwabing, which is kind of like North Beach, Schwabing in Munich. It's a Bohemian, sort of like North Beach. But in this big park, I would get up in the morning, walk up, take the trolley car. The trolley goes to the end of the line, and that's the Max Planck Institute. And John Wheeler, Archibald Wheeler, worked with they created the fusion, the hydrogen bomb, all that stuff. All these, and I was there for this guy who was there, Kruskal, Rostock. In any case, a lot of these famous guys, all related to the nuclear weapons and stuff like that. They're there.
Okay,
it's a NATO. NATO is paying for it.
Right.
North Atlantic Treaty Organization. And then after that. I actually left a week or two earlier because I had to get to Harwell. They didn't like that. Then I was also married, meet my wife. I spent several weeks in Harwell at Ridgway House. We're billeted at Ridgway House was a former RAF officers' quarter. And, there were a bunch of the airfields. The U.S. Air Force still had And it actually still does. I think, there's a bunch of U.S. Air Force, British Air Force facilities around
Right.
there. That's where the Spitfires and the Battle of Britain, they were all, some of them were there. And some of these guys from the RAF, they were still there at Harvard. They were working for the atomic energy thing. There were still these guys, including military intelligence officers. I was, living with them. It's like an officer's mess. It's like a hotel.
Okay.
On the campus of the Atomic Energy Research thing.
Okay.
And while there, it was a very nice place. I was in the theoretical physics division at Harwell, and it was like being at a university.
Okay.
And I would go to Oxford. I would go down to the University of London, and when going down to Imperial College, University of London, with Abdus Salam and Goldstone, and anyway, so it was all these guys. And this is Higgs, the Higgs mechanism, and they were all like developing this stuff. And I would go back to Harwell and talk about what they were doing at Imperial College. And there was this young guy, about my age, maybe a little older, named Marshall Stoneham. He's a solid state guy, and he was, as a result of my going down to Imperial, Marshall and I wrote this paper called The Goldstone Theorem and the Jan-Teller Effect, which was published, this is 1966, was published in the Proceedings of the Physical Society of London. And what it does, it shows how the stuff that they were doing at Imperial, which is sort of related to the Higgs mechanism in high energy physics, how it relates to condensed matter physics. In this case, it's how a distortion of a lattice, just a crystal lattice, a distortion kind of creates, in a way, a kind of room temperature superconductor. I mean, I'm exaggerating a little bit, but there were connections to all this current interest in room temperature superconductors, L99, even though it doesn't work, but they're claiming because of the distortion. Anyway, it sounds to me like maybe they're talking about the Jan-Teller effect. So this, even though that particular thing they're doing didn't work because they're not accurate enough, that we may be able to get it to work because I'm now seeing a connection. I could be wrong. This is just, I'm just... It's still half-baked. I think the stuff I did at Harwell in 1966 with Marshall Stoneham, that may be applicable to getting room temperature superconductivity along the lines as LK99. I could be wrong, but it's just it's just an idea that we have to think about. This is all too new. But in any case, this paper that I wrote with Marshall actually wrote most of it. In the 1980 American Journal of Physics, Papers on Symmetry in Physics is a recommended paper. One of the recommended, as being an important paper. Okay? And at that point, so already there's, so I go back to La Jolla, all right? And so what happens then? I don't know. Should we take it?
So the back of this book, The Great Race: Physics, Paranormal, Time Travel, and UFOs.
Yeah.
It says the thrilling true story that was left out of David Kaiser's book, How the Hippies Saved Physics. How Jacques Sarfatti, asked by the CIA, with the Russians watching, solved the hard problem of consciousness, remote viewing, psychokinesis, and how the time-traveling warp drive UFOs that the U.S. Navy is defenseless against really work.
Yes.
So I guess what I'm getting at is, how did the CIA ask you to do this?
Well, this happened over a long period. It wasn't just one thing.
So it wasn't one thing that happened.
No,
this
it was
sort
a bunch
of
of things.
So you were basically just surrounded by military intelligence people.
Yes.
And so the CIA never actually said, hey, can you do this for us?
No, but they did. I was just telling you, this guy, George Kubin, CIA, he was, he's Army. When I say CIA, I also mean the whole industrial community.
Okay, I see. I understand.
But there's more. I was actually, later on, I mean, many encounters. There's this guy, Harold Chipman. This is now the mid-1980s. Harold Chipman, who was at the time chief of station of the CIA headquarters here in San Francisco. They have an office. Let's say where it is. But he had previously been head of Berlin Station CIA during either the 60s or the 70s. Okay, you can look him up. He's people write about him. Harold Chipman,
Right,
and
right.
he was funding me.
Okay.
And he was involved in MK Ultra back in San Francisco whenever they did in the late 50s.
Yeah, I was looking up yesterday. We were walking down the street. I saw the Haight-Ashbury Clinic wasn't that far away from here.
Well, yeah, nothing's far. I mean,
Haight-Ashbury Clinic's like 5 minutes down the road from here, right?
No, that's not the Haight-Ashbury. No, Haight-Ashbury is far. It's not 5 minutes.
Oh, really? I thought it was closer.
No. It's about 15, 20, 30 minutes. It depends on traffic.
Oh, okay.
It's over at Haight-Ashbury. It's a different part of town.
Okay.
It's not that far. It's maybe 2
Right.
miles.
Yeah,
but,
it's pretty close.
No. I mean, this is a small town. So
Tell me again, who specifically pulled you out of the university?
well, wait. That's what we have to get to. Okay, we'll get to that.
Just real quick. Let's just do it real quick.
because they say that's the Puthoff. That's Hal Puthoff.
That's Hal Puthoff.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
Okay.
That's all. That's that interlude. Okay, so all right, I'm teaching at San Diego State, young assistant professor. I'm there with this guy Fred Wolf, and I'm also doing. I'm split between. I was singing in the San Diego Civic Opera and also the local San Diego State Gilbert and Sullivan Society again, doing a bunch of shows, and also trying to be an assistant professor. And my wife at the time, Roberta, she was a professor of English at San Diego State. Any case, I had a pretty full schedule, and she didn't like. She thought I was having an affair. I wasn't. So my wife got pissed, got a little paranoid. And so I wind up getting a divorce like in 69, 70, around 1970, I guess it was. And this other crazy physics guy who's a bit older than me, he's an associate professor, I'm an assistant professor, he winds up getting a divorce at the same time. So we move in together, on the edge of campus, like The Odd Couple. I don't know if you saw that movie with Jack Lemmon and Walter Matthau. Mm-hmm. I'm kind of like the slob Walter Matthau, and Fred Wolf is kind of like Jack Lemmon. And we're at the edge of the campus, and it's like the Christmas time of 73, is it? Oh, no, it's Christmas time of 72. Yeah, Christmas time of 72. And Fred gets a phone call from his friend Bob Tobin from Chicago, where Fred went to high school, and Bob and Fred were on the football team together. And Bob has made a lot of money in the commodities market in Chicago, and he's kind of a zany artist guy. So Bob says he wants to come to San Diego. So Fred said, yeah, come on, everything's pretty loose. So Bob shows up. And then a strange thing happens. And he said the reason he came is that he got a book contract and a television contract about this guy, here's the Mossad, about the Israeli psychic Uri Geller. Does the name Uri Geller ring a bell?
No.
Oh, you don't even know Uri Geller?
Nope, no clue.
God.
Israeli psychic?
Yes. Turns out he's a Mossad agent.
Okay.
This is the Mossad that you're so interested in. Okay.
Yeah.
We didn't know at the time.
Mm-hmm.
Oh God, you don't know about Uri Geller. So Uri Geller today is back in Israel. He's a close confidant of Bibi Netanyahu.
Okay.
They were in the '67 war together in that elite paratroop unit.
Right.
Which there were two
right.
Netanyahus. One brother got killed later in Entebbe and all that stuff. This is all part of that. Okay. But we didn't know at the time. This is now 1972. And we didn't know what he was. We were like, we didn't know who Uri Geller, what? Paranormal. So, in any case, so he says he's coming to, he's got a lot of money. He says you don't have to take time off. You don't have to teach. So this is a CIA operation, right? And he said, you don't have to teach. I got plenty of money. And I'll cut through a bunch of details.
Who said this?
Bob Tobin.
Bob Tobin.
Bob Tobin comes from Chicago.
Got it.
And wants and he wanted Fred. He didn't even know about me at that point. He wanted Fred to explain using quantum mechanics how consciousness works and how the paranormal, how Uri Geller is able to bend metal with his mind, psychokinesis. Okay, bend spoons and stuff like that.
He actually bent spoons with his mind?
Well, that was the claim. A lot of guys like Amazing Randy said it was a magic trick, but it's not so simple as that.
Is there footage of him doing this?
Magicians can do magicians can do some of what Uri Geller does. They can't do everything Uri Geller does. And Uri Geller is a magician, and at times he did cheat and do the tricks that the magicians, which they caught him on. But he didn't always do it that way because you can't always control his power, all right? So, any case, we didn't know anything. We were pretty naive. So Fred, and then, and Bob is he's a nice, a zany guy, and then so Bob says, he includes me in it too. So, okay. So Bob leaves, and then a couple of weeks later, Fred Wolf gets a call from Paris from a friend of his who's in the French University, the physics department, who Fred had worked with on a time. Remember, Fred was doing a nuclear explosion physics, Lawrence Livermore, stuff like that. And this French friend says, "Listen, this guy's leaving for a couple of months. Why don't you come to Paris, teach a course just one day a week? You can teach in English if you want." And Fred said, "Okay, sounds good." Especially since we have this extra money from Bob Tobin. Says, "Whenever you need money, don't worry about money. I want you to work on this other thing." And then Fred also then gets a call from John Hasted, who's head of physics department at the University of London in what's called Birkbeck College. Similar offer, says, "Look, we want you to come, and you could also teach. You could go back and forth between Paris and London and teach these courses." Just And then I get a call from London, from Abdus Salam, who's the head of Imperial College. I remember I mentioned him when I was at Harwell. Mm-hmm. And he says he's running an institute in Trieste, Italy, called the International Center for Theoretical Physics in Trieste, which is where the Russian physicists, the African, Indian, Chinese, American, all over South America, international, UNESCO, United Nations. And this is where I'm working on what Lazar calls gravity A, gravity B. He calls it that. That's how we call it, okay? But that's the thing. I had been working on that already. And Abdus Salam, who later got a Nobel Prize, by the way, he was also working on it. And so he said, come to Trieste. I'll give you a job. All right. So suddenly, a few weeks after Bob leaves, saying, "Listen, you don't have to stay here. I got plenty of money. I want you guys to work on this Uri Geller thing. How does physics explain consciousness?"
Yeah.
There's no mention of flying saucers. Just consciousness, paranormal, bending metal. How could the mind bend metal? Things like that. Telepathy, right? And so here we are. So we're getting ready. So, okay, so I'm living. I have a girlfriend at the time. I had met her, but she had previously worked in the Office of Naval Intelligence at the American Embassy in London, which is kind of interesting. But so she's with me. And it's now 1973. It's 20 years after my phone calls. Okay?
Okay.
And I hadn't been thinking about the phone calls. They were not in my mind. And so I'm scheduled to fly to London and then on to Trieste. And it's now the weekend before my flight is leaving San Francisco on a Wednesday. It's now the Sunday morning before I'm flying out, and I'm with my girlfriend and I was staying at her mother's house in Carmel Valley. It's down in Carmel Valley. And I'm in bed. It's Sunday morning. So this is now time travel now. It's Sunday morning. Sharon's mother brings in the San Francisco Chronicle Sunday paper. Okay, I'm in bed looking at the paper. I open up the San Francisco Chronicle magazine section, and there's a big multicolor major spread on Stanford Research Institute testing Uri Geller for his paranormal powers. Maybe this thing's over there, right? Okay. I said, "Hey, This is just what Bob Tobin wants to give us money to work on.
Right.
Right? Was that me or you?
That was you.
Oh, yeah. How's that happening? Huh. So that's somebody's listening.
That's Uri Geller.
Oh, no, it's Mossad.
Yes, it's Mossad. They're listening.
All right, so I say, hi, this is weird, you know. So Monday morning comes, and I say, I got to call these guys. Get on the phone, call the Stanford Research Institute. And this guy, this Irish guy, thick Irish accent, Brendan O'Regan, gets on the phone and says, Dr. Sarfatti, we were hoping you would call. Do you realize how weird that is? Because who can arrange that I'm going to, first of all, that I'm going to pick up the damn newspaper, look at the article, and then decide to call him. This can only be had, there's something really high. This is Twilight Zone now, right? I said, we were hoping you would call before you left for England. So you already knew I was going to England. Okay?
Whoa.
Okay? So they said, could you just drive up? They knew where I was. Yeah, not far from the car. It's an hour and a half. Again, said, can you come up to Stanford? We'd like to talk to you. Get in the car. And I get there. And first thing, I meet Brendan, and he takes me across from SRI to what's called Noetics Institute. And who do I meet? I meet Edgar Mitchell. You know who he was?
Oh, yeah, of course.
Okay, Edgar Mitchell. He's the head of the project. The guy who walked on the moon. Astronaut. Edgar Mitchell. I meet Brendan O'Regan. He takes me to meet Edgar Mitchell. Okay. Then, this is where Jacques Valle comes in. Jacques Valle's involved in this. He says, okay. And I didn't know. I had no idea who Jacques Valle was. Then I'm told, Jacques Valle has arranged a meeting at this guy, Dean Brown. Dean Brown's house, in Menlo Park somewhere. Dean Brown's one of the original Silicon Valley venture capital guys, rich guy. This is all intelligence, right? You look back now, there's the book. You see that book, Third Eye Spies? It's all about that. It's about the CIA. That's Russell Targ. Have you talked to Russell? She talked to Russell Targ. He's still alive, and he's 90, so you better talk to him fast. Call him up.
Russell Targ?
Targ.
Targ.
Did you ever see the film Ghostbusters?
Of course.
Well, that Ghostbusters, that's Russell Targ. He's the ghost, the guy, the gawky guy.
Oh, wow.
It's based on Russell Targ.
Really?
Yeah. Of course. God, right.
I don't know anything.
Right, okay.
That's why I do this.
So, in any case, Russell's still alive. He's 90 years old, so I'll give you his contact. You call him.
Okay.
Because he was there. So they're supposed to, Jacques Valle has arranged a meeting for Jack, for me, and Hal Puthoff, and a bunch of guys, some psychologists. They were all, some of them was CIA, I guess. I didn't know who they were. And so we go there, but Jacques never showed up for some reasons. I don't know, which is interesting. You could have, hey, Jacques, you arranged this meeting for Jacques Sarfatti and Brendan O'Regan at SRI in 1973. How come you never came?
When I leave here, I'm going straight to his apartment, so I'll ask him when I get there.
No, are you really?
No.
All right. Well, you should, actually. All right. So now.
We're going to record in the library.
Okay, now, the important point is this is a CIA operation, now public, as everybody, the book's written about it, okay? It's in How the Hippies Saved Physics. All right. But the point is, part of that meeting, you can listen to it because the CIA, they tape recorded the entire meeting. Okay. And somebody said, guy Saul Paul I had like an hour of it, hour and a half, not the whole thing. But you can hear me. It's online. It's on SoundCloud. You can actually hear me. 1973.
Really?
Oh, yes.
How do you search for this and find this?
It's just Jack Sarfatti SoundCloud, CIA.
Jack Sarfatti CIA meeting SoundCloud.
Yeah, whatever. I'll give it. Remind me. I'll send it.
Okay.
Yeah, you can find it easily. It's on Google.
Okay.
and in there you can hear Russell Targ, the subject, this rabbi, this is all Mossad too. It's all a combination. This rabbi, I forget his name, this crazy rabbi. Forget his name. He's still alive. Jim Hurtek. He's a UFO rabbi, flying saucer
A
rabbi.
UFO rabbi.
Kabbalah,
That's amazing.
New Age, okay. I think he's still alive. And Russell knew him. So Russell starts saying about Jim Hertag and the UFOs as time machines coming back from the future. So Russell talks about it. Yeah, you'll hear it. And then it's, I remember that. Hey, listen what happened to me. And I tell the story. I told you. I tell the story. And Brendan O'Regan says, oh, yeah, we have data, several hundred cases of kids. We have data on that. We know about this.
What?
Okay, so there you go. So what's going on here, man? And you can hear it yourself. You don't take my word for it. And you can talk to Hal Puthoff. Is there. Now, you should definitely get Hal Puthoff and Russell talking before they die. They're almost 90. Hal Puthoff is not going to last that much longer. He's 5 years old. He's going to be 89, 87.
What is his story? Because he's interesting to me because he was a Scientologist at one point.
No, that's bullshit. Let me explain.
No, he admitted he was. There was a video.
No. That's exactly. You don't understand the context of that.
Well, here's the interesting thing about the Scientology stuff is because we talked about this last night. Jack Parsons.
There's all these.
Who's like the father of rocketry or whatever his name is.
L. Ron Hubbard.
He was friends with L. Ron Hubbard and Aleister Crowley.
Yes, I know all about that because I'm one step removed from that. I'm connected with that. It's all connected. See, there's no accidents here. Okay. But wait, let's first Hal Puthoff. Let me explain Hal Puthoff. First of all, Hal Puthoff, and he never told me the details, indicated that what happened to me with the phone call happened to him. He may not have gotten a phone call, but he didn't want. Hal Puthoff. I was told by Christopher Green that Hal Puthoff at times has held the highest possible security clearances. He was an officer in the Naval Intelligence before he got his PhD, electrical engineering, and from Stanford, and he. And it was, you have to talk to Russell Targ and Hal Puthoff. They have to tell you the history, how the CIA got involved with them, okay?
Okay.
But Puthoff himself was already in that. Puthoff told me that he explored, as part of the project to explore psychic power with the CIA, he went to Scientology meetings. Doesn't mean he was a Scientologist. He may have joined, officially just, because he wanted to see what they had. It was L. Ron Hubbard. We know all about Jack Parsons. If you read about Jack, what is it, Strange Angel? You've seen the book, the Jack Parsons book?
No.
There's a book, a biography.
Strange Angel?
Strange Angel. It's all about all this stuff. Jack Parsons worked with Frank Molina back in the 1930s, on all this rocket stuff. JATO. They started, what is it? Aerojet General? The JATO?
Aerojet, yeah.
Yeah, Aerojet.
Yeah. There's actually a big Aerojet base. It's abandoned now in South Florida.
Yeah. This is all Frank Molina and Jack Parsons. And Jack Parsons was financing Aleister Crowley. And L. Ron Hubbard was, I think they knew L. Ron Hubbard. I knew people, some of the people who supported me worked with L. Ron Hubbard and Puthoff. They were all these, plus it's a science fiction, Walter Breen. All these guys knew each other. It's a small world.
Why are all these guys why are they
they're
so
all
into
intelligence. They're all part of the OSS, that sort of stuff.
But why are they so into the occult?
Well,
and all this angels and demons type stuff?
Well, Jacques, that's why they are. That's good. Okay, short answer. Because angels and demons of the Bible are real. They are the extraterrestrial time travelers. Okay, that's why. So it's all real. All the stories in the Bible are real. They're based on, they're not, it's like, they're distorted. But all the stuff, angels and demons, Paradise Lost, John Milton and Lucifer and Satan is real. They're all real. These are the Greek gods are real. The Egyptian gods, all that stuff, Stargate, they're all coming back. It's all true. These are all time. Okay, let me explain. Okay, let me give the content. And this is why the guys in the CIA, this is those guys who Lazar is talking about. They know this. This guy, John Ramirez, who's CIA retired, he knows all this. He's one of my supporters. John Ramirez, get in touch. I have his email. Just remind me, get in touch. What's happening is this. The physics of UFOs just tic-tac. Everything that the Congress with the idiots, they should be talking to me. They're so stupid, okay? You listen to Jack, you call Jack. Talk to me, okay? You talk to me. You don't need anyone else. You talk to the Sarfatti. Don't fuck with the Sarfatti. All right. So, but no, seriously, all the physics of this stuff is very elementary. All the physicists who are not stupid and who are not afraid, we all understand what's going on here. It's not hard to understand. Okay, it's easy. It's easy to understand this stuff. Okay, that means we know that there are plenty of. We know there's life all over the place. There's no question of that.
We know that?
Of course we know that.
How do we know that?
We know that from as a theoretical physicist. I know it with almost 100%. You know how I know it? Because I know the laws of chemistry. I know the laws of physics. I know the DNA code. And this is universal. It doesn't just. It's called the Copernican principle. We're not special. This is all. Well, we're not some special thing. It happens all over the place. It's just chemistry. It's quantum mechanics. It's Schrodinger's equation. And things are just going to evolve. You pump energy in, and the complex molecules form, and the DNA code forms, and we're here. We're not so special. Okay?
We don't have any evidence of life.
Yes, we do.
How?
Now, see, you don't understand how physics works. I know from the laws of nature that it has to be. But of course we know because I was.
You know because you know physics. You claim all this stuff, but we don't know physics. I don't know physics.
But then you have to take my word for it. I know more than you. Okay, you're a dumb little fuck who's only 38 years old, and I'm 84 years old, and I know things that you don't know. So learn,
right? But explain to me.
Yeah,
explain to me.
I was once
like
a
I'm
dumb
a third
fuck
grader.
Like you. Yeah.
How?
Because it was something called the Copernican principle. People used to think that the Earth was special, and then the whole revolution in astronomy with Isaac Newton and Copernicus is that we're not the center of the universe. So you're just still like the medieval peasant who still thinks we're the center of the universe. The physics of life is now we have CRISPR, we have a genetic engineering, we know exactly how it works.
Right.
So it's universal. It's gonna.
But that doesn't prove that there's life that there's life out there, that there's interdimensional life or interplanetary life.
Yes, it proves it because we know. Of course, it proves it. If you believe in physics, it's got to be. Even this is not even controversial. Even people who disagree about the aliens and the flying saucer at the time, even they agree with me on this. This is what I'm telling you now is mainstream now. Anyone who. You're not some. What was your degree in college?
I went to college for 6 months and I dropped out.
Okay, so you don't know anything. You don't know science. You don't know.
That's your job to explain it to me.
Yes, yeah. Okay, so but I can't. It took me 50 years to know this.
Right. But what's the point of spending 50 years learning stuff if you can't explain it to a layman?
But what I'm explaining to you is you have to take my word for certain things because we can't do everything. We can't do a 4-year thing in 30 minutes.
Right.
But the thing is,
but I need to understand.
What I'm claiming to you is, and this is not just me, this is now almost every scientist called, even the mainstream guys will say, we believe there's life out there. It would contradict everything we know about science if there wasn't. In other words, when there are these when there are Earth-like planets, they may not look exactly like us, but there's going to be DNA forming because we know how it forms. It's inevitable. So here's my point. Let me make my point. Okay. I'm just going to make the point. I don't want to argue it with you because you don't want to waste.
No, this is great. This is fun. I love this.
All right. But the point is this: what we know. Here's the story. The physics of this stuff is so easy, and life is universal. The DNA codes, it's just quantum physics. It's relativity. It's chemistry. It's just simple chemistry. And the stars, because all the stars are the same carbon, and we understand stellar structure. We know how the stars form. We have the stars form the elements that lead to life.
But we don't have the physical proof. We don't have
Well, we do. That's what Commander Forever's showing you. That's what these guys, Ryan Graves, are showing you.
Yeah, but there's so much disinformation.
No, forget that. Okay.
Who knows what's real?
No. Well, yes, there's some, but Sarfatti, take it from me. I know what's real. Now,
How do you know? How do you know?
I know because I'm a genius. That's how I know. I know because I've been in direct contact with the aliens, with the time travelers, whatever. I know, okay? That's how I know. I know. And I know because of the physics I'm getting is exactly what they said it was going to happen. It's all happening. And I know because what I'm telling you is how I met these guys. How do you explain that? Okay. We were hoping you would call. They knew where I was going. These guys, the CIA themselves, they're not in charge. They're useful idiots. Like we're all puppets. They're not the puppet master. They're the puppets. They're maybe a little. There are different levels. There's some puppets pulling strings of other puppets. You know what I mean? So that's how they. So I meet Hal Puthoff. Let's get back to this. You'll hear that. You could hear the tape where I'm meeting them in the talk. I talk about the UFO from the future, and that because it was Russell Targ who brought it up. I didn't bring it up. He brings it up. Okay. So there we are. So I'm claiming that is smoking gun evidence for time travel. In other words, what happened to me in 1953, the computer side was going to begin to meet these guys. It happened exactly on cue, and there's no other way to explain it. And it turns out the CIA was involved at the highest levels, but they're just as clueless. They're just as, so to speak.
So you're saying there, as far as like a hierarchy of power in our world is the top levels, the aliens, next level's intelligence.
I don't know if it depends on, no. There's a higher intelligence. They're more advanced than we are, and they've mastered time travel. I'm working on the equations of time travel. That's what I'm doing. That's what all this stuff is. That's what they're doing at Lawrence Livermore now.
Okay.
They're testing my time travel equation.
Okay.
It's elementary physics. Okay, you just got to take my, I can yell and scream, but you just got to take my word for it.
I just want to understand it. That's all.
You won't be able to understand. You want too much too fast. It's not easy to understand. This took us 60 years. The smartest people still don't understand it.
Right.
But I understand more than they do. So the point is this. This is being. That's what the Destiny Matrix is. The Tic Tacs, all these things the Navy is seeing and the Russians are seeing. They're neutralizing our nuclear missiles, right? This is all.
Yeah. There's lots of documented cases of that.
So this is superior technology. I am developing the basic equations for this technology, for time travel, to neutralize nuclear weapons, to go to warp drive, to go to Mars. In 10 minutes we get to Mars.
So, okay, going to the Tic Tacs.
Yeah.
Who was controlling those Tic Tacs?
The same people who contacted me in 1953. They're in control.
Who are those people? Are those people?
I don't know exactly who they are. I just know they're there. I don't know everything, but I know enough.
Are they people from the future?
Well, yes, they're from the future. I don't know if they're people. What do you mean by people?
I don't know. Are they?
It said it was a conscious computer.
Are they from a conscious computer?
Well, yeah. So at least they're like Terminator.
But you don't know where they're from.
They're from. They said in one case, one guy. There's a whole side story where it said it was Ingo Swann said it was 100 years in the future, and that was back about 40 years ago. So it'll be 50, 60 years in the future, maybe by the end of the century.
Okay.
Which makes sense actually, because I think that's about when when all this stuff will probably happen. So assuming we don't. Knock us out. So, but this gets back to your Bob Lazar story. The guy saying that the alien had a sulfurous smell.
That's not Bob Lazar. So yes. So
that's a friend of yours. Okay.
My friend James Fox. He made a documentary called The Phenomenon.
James Fox talks about this guy with the clothes, the satanic, the demon. With
No. So James Fox made a documentary called The Roswell of Brazil, and it was about in the 90s, the early 90s. There was two creatures that were discovered by these girls that were walking through a field. They saw this creature that reeked of sulfur, and it was sitting there and it was like hurting, and it was telepathically communicating with one of them, saying it needed help. And later there was another one captured, I think at the same day, maybe later in the day, by the military or by the police, captured it alive, brought it to a hospital in Virginia, Brazil, and James interviewed the X-ray technician, a bunch of people that worked in the hospital.
Okay.
They all said that there's pictures, illustrations of what they saw. Yeah. And they said people were in there taking photos and videos, although none of that's been released. Yeah. And they said that the hospital, they're being reeked of, and the hospital smelled like sulfur for like weeks afterwards, even after the U.S. military came in and took it out.
Yeah, this is exactly where John Milton got Paradise Lost and all these poetic things from the Elizabethan age, and after that, this is all true. All these stories have truth in them, because let me get the, life is everywhere, all different kinds of life, okay? The physics is elementary, so as soon as any civilization anywhere that doesn't kill itself with nuclear bombs, they'll develop this technology. So this is exactly Star Trek. Star Trek is real. And Gene Roddenberry was part of my, I didn't know him personally. Gene Roddenberry was influenced by the same people that I was involved with. This guy, Andrea Paharich, Uri Geller, all these people connected. I knew Francis Ford Coppola, who connected with Spielberg, or Close Encounters of the Third Kind. I'm the guy who got Jacques Valle to meet, connected with Spielberg for Close Encounters of the Third Kind. Okay? So everything is connected. All these science fiction things, and L. Ron Hubbard, they're all conditioning the public for the actual contact. So there is no more science fiction. Timothy Leary said it's science faction. Okay, everything, all these movies.
Timothy Leary said that.
Yeah, Timothy was part of our group too. Leary.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, there's a whole thing. You got to actually, some of it is in there. You got to. Well, we'll keep it down. It's a complex story, so you can't tell it in 2 hours, really. Yeah, I knew Timothy Leary. Timothy Leary said I was his heir. Timothy Leary had, in fact, there's the guy.
Did you ever try LSD?
Yeah, but many years ago. Yeah, 2 or 3 times.
Was that a part of any of these studies?
No, well, that's a whole other story. I mean, it does. That involves strategic defense initiative, but
it involves what?
The strategic defense initiative.
How so? We got time.
Yeah, well, because at that point, it was in the 1980s, we were working with the Reagan people, and I was with this guy. Part of one of my mentors, so to speak, was this guy named Marshall Nafee, billionaire. Yeah, what it creates movie theaters, cable television. He created Comcast. Comcast is all created by and Liberty Media, and Doug Trumbull worked for him. Movie industry, movies. He and his brothers. His father was his father, grandfather? I guess his father. Yeah, no, must have been his father. His father in the 1890s in San Francisco, Barbary Coast, the Nickelodeons, the first movie, Nickelodeon with the movies, the first movies like this, okay? And his father's friend was Giannini, Bank of America. It was then called the Bank of Italy, became Bank of America.
Okay.
So this is back before around World War One, okay? And so Giannini gives money to Marshall Nafee's dad, and they form United Artists Studios. Back, it's just the silent movies. Douglas Fairbanks, Charlie Chaplin, all these guys, if you know the history of the movies at all. And so this is so they're one of the primary families of the Hollywood.
Okay.
Okay. And when Marshall was around 20 years old, right before the war, 1938 or so, his buddy, you know who Gary Cooper was?
No.
You don't know who Gary Cooper was? God, Darkness at Noon.
Who was he?
Gary Cooper was like Cary Grant.
Oh.
God, you guys don't know. God, I feel like I'm. These are the famous 1930s, 20s Hollywood.
Do you know who he is?
Cary Grant?
Yeah.
Sounds familiar.
God, okay, this is amazing. Amazing. What am I doing? I'm on this planet. I'm not. This is not my planet, guys. Not my planet. Okay, Cary. Okay. Oh, I know Gary Cooper's daughter is a friend of mine. If she heard this, she'd be shocked.
Sorry.
Yeah, these are all famous Hollywood movie stars in the 1930s to 40s.
Okay.
Marilyn Monroe. You know Marilyn Monroe?
Sounds familiar.
No, you're kidding there, right?
I know who she is.
Joe DiMaggio. I mean, yeah, she was here, Marilyn. Mm-hmm. Okay. So, in any case, so Gary Cooper and Marshall, the kids, they go on a tour of Europe, and they meet the Queen of England and the King of Denmark. I mean, these are the very highs. When Franklin Delano Roosevelt came to San Francisco, he stayed at the Navy's house.
Okay.
Pacific Heights here. Now where Nancy Pelosi and Feinstein, the fancy mansions there. And so, in any case, so it's now the early 1980s, and Marshall is, he's kind of like, he's like a shaman. He really is kind of like a puppet master type guy. He's very psychic. Remember, he's a billionaire. already back then he had $1 billion, more than $1 billion. And so and I did and he did LSD. So I did LSD with Marshall about 2 or 3 times, and we had time. We went back to ancient Egypt, all kinds of like interesting trips. I was back in ancient Egypt with Marshall.
Really?
In an Emerald Temple, it was like that. That was the experience. And then I was a knight in the Templars and the Crusades. It's all real, So it's like time travel. The sort of stuff you read, what he's talking about in there, in that book. But what David Gladstone, give me the book for a minute. What David Gladstone, can you see it? What Gladstone talks about in this book, I actually had those experiences.
Raise it up a little bit higher.
I had some of those experiences. It's on Amazon. I had some of those same kind of experiences that Gladstone talks about that sound crazy with Marshall Nafee, billionaire, friend of Ronald Reagan. Okay? So what happened was, this is the backstory of the Strategic Defense Initiative. And Kim Burafato can confirm. Kim was there with me. Kim, the guy you met with Marshall, confirm everything I'm telling you, witness, okay? So, and this guy who wrote the book, he was part of it too. So there's many witnesses to all this stuff. And so I challenge anybody who wants to say Jacques Sarfatti is lying, you come and mano a mano, you face me and we'll discuss. Okay? So that's an open challenge.
Okay.
You want to duel with Sarfatti? I'll duel with you. Okay.
All right.
So now, Ronald Reagan. Okay, let's get to Ronald Reagan. Ronald Reagan is the governor of California in late 70s. There's a guy named Laurie Chickering. He just died a week ago. And Laurie Chickering comes the Chickering family, the old WASP family, like Mayflower type, the old in New England, but they're here in San Francisco. And Laurie's brother is high up. One of his brothers is already high up in the Central Intelligence Agency. Laurie goes to Yale. He's Skull and Bones and all that stuff, and he's a close friend of William F. Buckley Jr. I don't know if you know who that is.
I've heard of him.
Yeah, National Review, And Laurie comes back to San Francisco, and he is involved with Caspar Weinberger, who became the Reagan Secretary of Defense, Brent Scowcroft, General, who became head of, I think, Reagan's National Security Agency, and who else? Milton Friedman, economist, Chicago, actually. That's maybe why they wanted me to go to Chicago. Milton Friedman, yeah. And who was some of the other guys? Oh, yeah. Who's the guy? Donald Rumsfeld. Donald Rumsfeld. Okay, wait.
Right guy.
Oh, yeah. And he was a good-looking guy, but not that smart again. Okay, Don Rumsfeld. And who's the other one? I'm leaving somebody important out. Let's see. Well, it'll come to me. And they set up a think tank when Reagan's still the governor, like 78, 79, called the Institute for Contemporary Studies down here on Kearny Street, right near where Francis Coppola has his building. And they're the main thing. They're connected with the Hoover at Stanford, the Hoover Institution. And I was kind of like their informal science guy. And any case, they're the main thing that they engineered, one of the main think tanks that engineered Reagan getting into the White House. So Reagan is the president now, in 1980. I think before he shot, was he already shot or before that guy shot him? And it was like around 1980, 1981. And Reagan's a close friend. Marshall could just call the White House and he wants to start. Ronnie, it's Marshall. It's that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. Okay. And all these guys had the Cafe Trieste where I showed you. Everybody's hanging out there at the Cafe Trieste. Okay.
Wow.
Okay. Coppola, Francis Coppola, whenever. When Oreshnikov came, Julie Christie, when anybody from Hollywood comes, that's their hangout. And another place called Enrico Benducci's down the street. Enrico was a kind of a nightclub. So, any case, at one point, Now, Marshall, for example, if a guy named, like if Coppola wanted to make a movie, Marshall's like the finance. You want to make a big movie, Hollywood movie, talk to Marshall, talk to the Nafee brothers first. Okay, James Bond, the James Bond movies?
Yes.
Okay. Did you ever see, but Sean Connery?
Of course.
Okay,
Yeah.
well, Al Broccoli made those movies. Marshall Nafee was his silent partner because he was, by law, for taxes or something, so you can have movie theaters, but you're not supposed to do movies. Production. Yeah, they split it for monopoly, whatever. Any case, Marshall had one of the old movies, the black Aston Martin, that the convertible that he drives.
Yeah.
There were 4 of those made for the movies. 4 of those. We had one of them. Marshall had one in his garage.
Oh, wow.
Okay. So Marshall's a powerful man. It's like but this is now 1980. He helped Reagan get into power, and I'm smoking dope. We're driving around we go to Mount Tam, get stoned, and he's an evangelical Christian. He's trying to get ready to listen,
right.
Evangelical Christian. Listen, that's what in the dope filled Jaguar. You're driving around listening to Jesus is going to save you, man. So, and that's when we tried LSD a couple of times. I had time travel trips. All right. Anyways, Laurie Chickering is now running the Institute for Contemporary Studies, and for some reason he wants to have lunch with Marshall. He had some project. He wanted to meet Marshall, so Laurie says, "Can you arrange a lunch? We'll have lunch at Enrico's, who's a close friend of Marshall. Enrico's where all the movie stars would hang out, on Broadway back then. Woody Allen, all kinds of people, and Mort Saul, and so I arranged a lunch, and we were having lunch, sitting around this round table, and Enrico, who plays the violin, and he's cooking pasta for everybody. It's like right out of a Godfather movie, sitting around there. And Marshall was stoned at the time. Maybe I was stoned too. I don't know, because we probably smoked before we went to lunch. But Laurie was straight. Laurie didn't, he doesn't know any of this stuff. He doesn't know about, he's a very straight, running, neocon type of guy. But we didn't know, Marshall had just made a movie with Al Broccoli and Sean Connery called Meteor. You could see it, 1980 or so, 1981. So Marshall's talking, they're having a conversation. Marshall, and he's kind of like in reverie, and he says, what if, it's Marshall, what if the extraterrestrials were going to attack us? They were coming. Marshall. This is like he's thinking of this movie. There was a meteor going to come to him. But Marshall says, what if there was, and what if, just the Cold War is on, 1980, Soviet Union. He says, what if we had to get together with Russia to fight the ETs, and we got the missiles, and we shoot down the flying saucers with the laser beams and all that stuff. But he was talking because he had just made a movie, but kind of that stuff was in the movie. It was some science fiction for him. But he was just talking. So, see, this is all being arranged for the future. This could, So Laurie, okay, so we have the lunch. Marshall leaves, and Laurie, and I'm like working, Laurie's giving me a little bit of money, living on the edge, Bohemians. You'll see, he talks about it in that book. Laurie says, hey, Jack, that was pretty interesting. Can you write up what Marshall was talking about? So I have a little thing, and I was working on stuff too about neutralizing nuclear weapons with laser beams. I was working on that myself. So I put in some of my stuff, and then also in there I say, and with this new technology, Sarfatti space, even then, although I didn't have it the way I have it now. But this new technology, we can render nuclear weapons impotent and obsolete, which is what the Tic Tacs are doing already. You see already. Mm-hmm. I already had that back in 1980. It's in this memorandum that I wrote. Okay, so it's a short thing. I give it to Laurie. A few weeks go by. I'm walking into the Cafe Trieste where I took you, where we met Kim last night.
Mm-hmm.
Laurie comes up to me excited. Says, hey, Jack. Well, he doesn't talk like that. I mean, he's aristocrat, and he says, I gave that report to Paul Nitze. If you look at Paul Nitze, Nitze, was the main arms control, security guide for Reagan, advising him on how to deal with the Russians and stuff like that.
Okay.
And Nitze really liked it. Okay, so went right to Reagan. Okay, this report, and then when Reagan found out that Marshall Nafee, who was his buddy from Hollywood, in fact, okay, now Edward Teller was pushing for this stuff, missile defense and lasers. This is all,
right.
Okay, and here Marshall's talking about it too. So Marshall may have known about Teller. Yeah, he may have known a little bit about it.
Didn't they have some sort of program they were working on with DARPA where they wanted to create some sort of like dome around the United States?
Wait. Don't jump ahead. Just stay on this. That's what we're doing now. That's what I'm doing. Okay, but wait, that's what Sarfatti Space Corp is all about.
I read about this though in that DARPA book that they worked on this back in the
but they didn't have, because that was me. That was my people. I mean, I know that they didn't have it. They thought about it. It was psychological warfare. We were thinking about it. Yeah. Okay, but it never happened. Well, the Iron Dome, that's the Iron Dome, the missiles against missiles. That's something else. I'm talking about some.
No, that's not what I'm talking about. I was talking about some sort of like
the force field.
Okay. Force field. Yeah, exactly.
All right. Wait a second. I guess. Okay. Wait. Let me finish this.
Okay.
Yeah, the answer is yes, I'm the guy for that, okay? I'm the guy who knows how to do that.
Okay.
Basically, all right? Basically is what I'm saying. All right, so now, and anybody wants to challenge me, you come. I don't care who the hell you are. You come,
You heard it here, folks.
Yeah, you come and we'll talk about all this.
Get in the octagon with
We'll
Jack.
talk about this in front of 1 million people, and then we'll see who wins, okay?
Okay.
All right. But let's get back to this. So at the same time, Paul Nitze is taking this memorandum I wrote, and then Edward Teller has a biography, his autobiography called Dark Matters. And Teller's talking about how he was trying to get Reagan to go for a strategic defense initiative. And Reagan, so I found out later, Reagan did not trust Teller. Reagan thought, because Reagan always was wondering, I don't, maybe he's a double agent or whatever. Reagan was a little paranoid about Teller. And Teller says in his book, he was out of the loop. He doesn't know. He was totally shocked when Reagan finally went, executive order, whatever it was, for a strategic defense initiative. That's because of the Sarfatti memo with Marshall Nafee's name on it that, I guess Reagan spoke to Marshall. Marshall's his buddy. He trusts Marshall. They would drink, they would socialize together back in, And so, but also at that time, Cap Weinberger, who was then the Secretary of Defense, I already had a following then, kind of, And Cap Weinberger's son, Cap Jr., was, like part of my fan club. Okay. So all this, I was writing a bunch of crazy stuff about all this stuff, and UFOs, and and EPR, and communication with submarines, and untappable. It's all in the book, How the Hippies Saved Physics, and so all of my writings was also going directly to the Secretary of Defense, Cap Weinberger, through his son, Cap Jr. would take, Cap Jr. was, I don't want to make it too much. It was like Hunter Biden and Joe Biden, except they weren't crooks, I don't think. Okay, but it was like Hunter Biden was Cap Jr., but he wasn't a dope addict or anything. He's a straight guy, okay? And in fact, he's still alive. You should try to find him. I don't know what happened to him, because Cap Jr. can confirm. He actually confirmed this guy Bill Burns, who did History Channel UFOs. Bill Burns? Did you ever hear Bill Burns? In any case.
You're talking about William Burns, the director of the CIA?
No, it's a different Bill Burns.
Okay.
That's a different Bill. But see if you can see if Jim Angleton will know how to find Cap Weinberger Jr. He's probably still alive. I could actually find him. I have.
Okay.
But we should try to find him, because he can confirm all this stuff. And Cap Jr. was telling us that he would fly to Camp David with his dad, Cap, and the president, and they would spend weekends at Camp David, and they would go over some of my stuff. Okay? Mm-hmm. This writings, they would discuss it. And also, and then in Reagan's, I think it's his 1984, maybe his 1986 State of the Union, he talks about me. He doesn't mention me. He says, and we know the physicists, They have touched the face of God. They show how God exists in there. We always talking about all that stuff, all this religion, all that stuff, and about Star Wars and all this stuff that we're going to do. He gives a very inspiring talk based on Jacques Sarfatti's information that he was getting, and I even have a letter from Cap Weinberger thanking me for my work, superluminal, all this stuff. All right. So it had direct. So okay. So of course the Russians were following all this. This is the Russians. See, the Russians were involved in all this.
How so?
Because we had back channels. We were talking to Russians. The Russians were already at Esalen. See, the Russians already knew about me back in this. The Russians already. Okay, we were already. The Russians first contacted us in 1975, at around the same time that Koopman's telling me, we want you to work on this, because we did a book about Uri Geller called Space, Time, and Beyond. It sold a couple 100,000 copies and influenced Hollywood. That's how I met Ellie Coppola, because of that book. That's how I connected with Coppola. That's how Jacques Valle got involved and everything. See, it's all being orchestrated by this higher power. Okay. Yeah, because this can't happen. It's not a random thing. All these strange, what Jung called synchronicities, all these strange coincidences happening. It's all kind of connected. Like I know Frank Molina, who was Jack Parsons' partner, and I stayed with Frank Molina in Paris at his place, at his beautiful place. So I mean, it's all, everybody's connected to everybody. And L. Ron Hubbard and Andrea. Everybody were like 1, 2, or 3 connections away. So if you do a web of who knows who, you'll see it's a tight web, like a tight spider web. Destiny, I call that the destiny matrix. It's not random. It's being orchestrated.
Why did you told me that the Russians came here to interview you about some stuff?
Yeah, well, that's more recently. Wait, let's go back. The first Russian thing is we have this book, which is basically a CIA engineered book, right? Which I didn't know at the time. I was what's called a useful idiot, not really, sort of suspecting, but not knowing for sure. All right, because it didn't come out publicly that what they were doing with Geller was CIA and Mossad until much later. Now it's in that book. It's in their books. These are books. That Third Eye Spy. Uri Geller has books, but so now it's all public information. Then it wasn't, and I wasn't even sure. I suspected, but I wasn't sure. So the book comes out, Space RBL, which we wrote in Paris, and E.P. Dutton. And in there we have this thing about biogravity. I don't know, it's some crazy thing that Bob Tobin was into, and I kind of went along with it. Yeah, Fred went along with it more. I wasn't that in. But then we get a call from Bob. Oh yeah, what's this guy? Dan Whitehead. Dan Whitehead was the editor at Dutton Books in Manhattan, and Dan Whitehead gets a call from the Russian embassy in New York, saying we are concerned that Tobin and Wolf Sarfatti, they wrote this book about biofields, and but they didn't give us credit. We had this Russian side, that's his theory, and they didn't give it credit. That's our first overt contact. Why did we give them credit? This is from, so we get, sorry, give them credit, we didn't know, that sort of thing. So that's the first overt thing. And then it was on Esalen. Then, already, now, let's see, so how do we know? Well, okay, so then in the 1980s, okay, then, this is now after this stuff with Reagan, around, just when Reagan gave that State of the Union speech, 1986 or so. Now you wonder about, okay, so now, at that point, there was no internet. There was Xerox machines. And I would, it was the way I do emails, I was doing like Xerox mailing. I had like a network with this guy, Ira Einhorn, whatever. So I remember I was down at Washington Square. There was a Xerox store there where there's now the Victoria Bakery. And I was like Xeroxing stuff to mail out. It was a crazy period. And I get a guy taps me on the shoulder. It's a guy, Harold Chipman. Harold Chipman. Now, you look him up and look at me, Harold Chipman. Harold Chipman was chief of station of the Central Intelligence Agency office in San Francisco. Okay, now this is like over. It couldn't be more right then, right? So I look out there, and there he is. He says who he is. He said, we go to the cafe, and he says he wants to. This is like now, it's official. It's the CIA. I even went to the CIA office with him a couple. In fact, I wanted to date. There was a pretty CIA agent, a woman, blonde, we went to Gold's Cafe. Yeah, I was hitting on her. This was now a relationship going on.
Good old honey trap.
Well, no, but she was already. She didn't. We were just friends. Nothing ever happened. But I would have liked something to happen. We went drinking at bars a couple of times. Down. And she's actually went pretty high up. I think she still may be alive. She still may be probably retired. I don't know. And damn. So in any case, I was involved with, I used to hang, I was involved with all these CIA guys in San Francisco. So, and at that point, and I even have documents on this. And at that point, they wanted to set up, just like now, the Sarfatti Institute to work on all this stuff. All this, communication with submarines, with the with entanglement, like what's now called quantum information theory, quantum computing. We had all the quantum spin computing. We all had the idea of quantum computing already.
Right.
All right. And he wanted to set up, and so he took me. Okay, so Chipman, he was Catholic, old Catholic faith with the coat of arms, and he was a member of Opus Dei, which is like the Catholic with the Pope. Back he's connected with the Vatican. That's how I know. And also the Knights of Malta. Mm-hmm. All right. And he was a member, do you know, the club, the Explorers Club in Washington, D.C. It's like the Bohemian Grove sort of thing, type thing in Washington, D.C. He was a member of the Explorers Club. And now it turns out he was also involved in the MK Ultra CIA experiments, LSD, in San Francisco.
How was he involved with that?
He was running it or something when he was early CIA. He was one of the guys in charge of it.
What?
Yeah, yes. And then he also was the guy behind the CIA operation at the Stanford with Hal Puthoff and all these guys. Okay, he was behind this
What's
guy.
His name again?
Harold Chipman.
Harold Chipman.
Harold Chipman. They call him Chip.
Harold Chipman.
Harold Chipman. You look him up. He was Berlin's. He was a real James Bond. He was like a guy. When he was younger, he was like, he went into Russia, and they attacked in the Ural Mountains. This is before I met him. They went in and they did an operation trying to get secrets on some bioweapon that they were working on in the Ural Mountains, and something went wrong, and hundreds of Russians were killed inadvertently. The team got screwed up, and he felt very guilty about that because it was not meant to happen. It was like to go in, get the information, get out without anybody even knowing. But something went wrong, and as a result, hundreds of people, maybe thousands of people, died in this secret Soviet bioweapons lab back. I don't know when it was.
Right.
Okay, that ultimately led. Hal was assassinated by the KGB. Before when I knew him,
Wow.
Because it was payback, and they said, and he kind of they poisoned him like the polonium poison, what they do like those guys. He was poisoned that way, and as he was dying, he got a call from the Soviet consul here, who was here back then, saying, "How are you doing?" And they couldn't prove. But he at that point he felt so he was really affected him because he had a conscience.
How do you know about all this stuff?
What?
How do you know about all these?
Because he told me.
He told you all this?
Yeah, of course. I'm not making it up.
So like when he was dying from this poison, he called you up and told you.
Well,
this?
we already know. Well, yeah. Well, there's another guy. This guy Riley. There's another guy who was part of our group who was close to him. And this involves Iran-Contra and weapons deals. And I know all kinds of stuff about what was going on back then, with the Iran-Contras. This is everything's involved, and I was on the edge of all that stuff, And there's this guy, Stephen. You have to interview Stephen Schwartz. That'd be for something. But in any case, so what was happening? Hal was trying to set up. He took me to University of San Francisco. Father Joseph Pezio, who is the head of the, the Jesuit order, at University of San Francisco. I met Father Pezio, Joseph Pezio, and they were going to set up this institute, think tank, for me to work on all the stuff that we're doing now, actually, back then in the 1980s. And if you look, I could show you who he's had. Roosevelt, one of the Roosevelt guys, one of the sons of FDR was involved. I actually have the stuff, and all these guys from Ray Klein, all these top guys from Wall Street, who are all going to be on the board of directors. We're all set up. This whole thing set up, and it would have happened, but then he got polonium, whatever, and he died.
Wow.
So that's it. It's happening again now. It's happening now, right? But this is back then. It was already supposed to happen, but didn't happen. All right. So now it's happening now.
Wow.
All right. So, there's, in fact, is my book Destiny Matrix? Do you see the book Destiny Matrix? Oh, yeah. There, let me just see if I can find it.
There it is, yeah.
Yeah, this is still on. Can you see this? Everything I'm telling you is in this book. You get this on Amazon.
Okay.
It's actually being redone. There's a new edition it'll be expanded. This stops at 2002. So
Look at that, man. What a cover.
Yeah, it stops at 2002.
What is that little guy in the front of it?
I don't know. That's just some, who the hell knows. But,
Time traveler?
so this is by Chipman here, and this is this thing. Hey, let me just say. The Sarfatti Institute. This institute, proposed to be located at the University of San Francisco, will be funded by the Sarfatti Corporation. They're bringing in money. Goals of the institute. The goals will, and this is an official CIA thing. Goals of the institute to conduct basic research in the quantum physics of non-local phenomena discovered by Albert Einstein in 1935, the Einstein-Podolsky-Rosen-Bohm effect, and to develop applications of the basic mathematics and physics research into patents for untappable, unjammable command control communications, 6th-generation quantum spin correlation supercomputers. This is 1985. Okay, wait. Get this. Quantum zero-point energy release for interstellar rocket engines. Super technology for the Strategic Defense Initiative, SDI, to reduce the possibility of nuclear war. Pi orbital electron spin control of recombinant genetic engineering. It's like CRISPR now. It's okay. Remember, this is 40 years ago. Manipulation of Hoyle-Gödel loops in time. That's the warp drive stuff. And, that's flying saucer stuff.
I want to talk to you about that real quick.
Okay, but let's finish. Otherwise, you get too scattered. The other fundamental applications as they emerge from the basic research program. Oh, now look. The style of the institute. This is the highest levels of people involved in this thing, okay? Top minds, both established and up and coming, should be paid to come and conduct research in an environment where they are unafraid to speculate. Remember, I didn't write this stuff. This is written by the CIA.
Unafraid to speculate.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Yeah, okay, this is important. This is ahead of its time. Let's go. Seminars, both formal and informal, shall take place. Entertaining educational media shall be developed for the public. Sounds like To the Stars Academy now, right? Scientists, poets, artists, political theorists, philosophers, military and intelligence officers, politicians, captains of industry, theologians shall be gathered together for workshops on the cultural impact of breakthroughs in the new physics. This is exactly like the Bohemian Grove.
That's what happens at Bohemian Grove?
Yeah, that's pretty much what happens at Bohemian Grove. That's what Oppenheimer, this is public now, Oppenheimer, the way the Manhattan Project started, I don't know if they'd have this in the movie, Oppenheimer gave a speech up in this chalet, I've been there, the chalet, all these top generals and politicians in 1941 and 42 saying with the Szilard paper that we have to build the atomic bomb. It was all done through the Bohemian Grove, through the Bohemian Club, which is a club down here, okay? All right, now, just let me, okay, I'm not going to, but let me say, some of the people, and this is important, some of the people, okay, banking. Senior partner, Paul Berry Associates. These are, you got to look these guys up. You could get
Okay.
this.
All right.
Okay.
Yeah, that's cool. Let's
Okay.
Let's keep going.
Foreign. Okay. There's also okay. Military. This is his background. You see all his CIA stuff on. Oh, wait, but just some of the other people who he was involved. Okay. Science. Arthur Shallow, Nobel Prize, one of the lasers. Shallow. I don't know. Military, E.B. Roberts, Johnson & Johnson Corporate. These are religious father, Joseph Petsios. This is all the religion's already here, right? So everything the guys tell you, there it is. It's right here. This is the Vatican, okay? Political, Dr. Ray Klein. You look up who Ray Klein is. Senior Associate, Center for Strategic and International Studies, Georgetown University. You look up who Ray Klein is. This is a big shot, okay? These are friends. These are Chipman's buddies.
Oh, wow.
Okay? The economic, Donald Hine, okay. Economic, yeah. Archibald B. Roosevelt Jr. Archibald B. Roosevelt, a son of the FDR, is part of this project. Chester Bunnell, there's a John G. Altenberg. Oh, Altenberg's a famous guy. Okay, so this is, here, this is the actual document that I reprinted in this book that shows you what the CIA was into. And it was actually ahead of it. It would have been great had it happened. It sort of happened, but haphazard, and it's now happening again. They're trying to do it again.
It's now happening right now.
It's now happening, and that is the...
you were trying to explain to me last night when I was asking you about the Grush testimonies and all the stuff that he was saying, and I was explaining to you that I was highly skeptical of the whole thing. The fact that they made it this big dog and pony show on national television. Yeah. And, I always question it. When the government starts to get behind it, I always question motives and what's going on.
Okay, first, when you say the government, there is no such thing anymore. There's no government. We're in a state of chaos.
All right, guys, that brings us to the end of part 1 of my conversation with Jacques Sarfatti. That's right, we have an entire second part of this conversation dropping next week. Jack and I get deep into the new UFO whistleblower disclosures, some black budget DARPA programs, and Jack is going to illustrate exactly how his UFO warp drive equation works. You're not going to want to miss it. Please hit the subscribe button as well as the bell so you can get notified as soon as the episode drops. I'll see you next week.